This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's going on, gang? Hope you had a great weekend. Welcome to another week and another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily right here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk channel. Welcome to everyone watching us on YouTube live this afternoon. Great to have you with us. And of course, everyone listening on the podcast on their drive home or a little bit later on today. Thanks so much. Obviously, we always appreciate 5-star ratings and reviews at Apple or Spotify if you have the opportunity. And for everyone listening on or watching on YouTube, make sure you've hit that red subscribe button and give a thumbs up for the episode. We got a great way to kick off the weekend. Obviously, lots to discuss coming out of the last couple of days since we've been off the air. Stanley Cup playoffs continue. Dave Poulin, TSN hockey expert's going to join us in about 20 minutes or so. And Jeff Hamilton as well, a little bit on the Jets, certainly quite a bit on the Bombers because it is game week. The preseason's behind us, and we are now officially counting down to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers home opener Friday night at IG Field. And in addition to Hammer and Dave Poulin, Steve Sandor is coming on. Now, normally I was hoping it would be talking about Canada playing Panama yesterday in World Cup friendly. That game didn't happen, and it really is the biggest story in Canadian sports right now. Essentially a strike by our Canadian men's national team, a bizarre press conference afterwards by the president of the Canadian Soccer Association, and huge questions as to where they go from here. But, you know, just 6 weeks removed or so from Canada qualifying for the World Cup and having one of the greatest days in Canadian soccer history on the men's side of things, definitely one of the darkest days. And Steven Sandor in Edmonton is going to join us a little bit later on that. Hey, a big thank you and a shout out to all the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Aikens Lake, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, Vita Health, Culligan Water, Manitoba Battery, Royal Sports, the gang out of Breezy Bend. Great to have the sun shining and the golf courses open again. Not Auto Corp, Little Brown Jug, Princess Auto, Boston Pizza, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Assiniboia Downs, back live racing tonight and tomorrow. Talk about that a little bit later on. And of course, our friends at Canadian Club and Coolbet Canada. Let's get Remis in here and get this show going. Remo, what's up? How was your weekend?
Great weekend. It's great weather. Loved getting outside. Yeah, I don't know. That's about it. I went to the Assiniboine Park Zoo. So if anyone was at the zoo Saturday morning, saw a 2-year-old kid running around yelling out all the dinosaur names, that was me. So
that was you, or that was Evan?
Well, it was him. Yeah, he was like very excited about Giganotosaurus and Parasaurolophus.
Do we have a dinosaur rating for the new? Now, is this a new dinosaur display for the summer? Or?
It's the same ones that they had last year, but it's really good. Dino lovers.
No, how does this compare to that dinosaur thing that you went downtown to a few months ago?
That one was this like on steroids. This is just like a nice quick loop, but it's fine. You're outside. It's good.
Anything else? Any other zoo tips right now for people that are going to be getting out there? Any new animals? Any highlights of the walkthrough?
Look, I don't go for the real animals, just the fake animatronic dinosaurs. We're not there for the real animals. Come on.
Well, I can tell you, I got out, and like so many of you, I'm sure you sort of, hopefully made the most of. I mean, it wasn't particularly warm, but just the fact that the sun was shining the way that it did after the weather that we've had for so long was just great to get out. Head up the ballpark. Saw a bunch of guys. Oh, Remo, we should give a special shout out to a couple of our DraftKings regulars. Mm-hmm. I saw Jason Jett at Craft Beer Corner, and Steve O87 was there. Steve O87's bachelor party. They
Oh.
do a bunch of stops, but they set up shop at Craft Beer Corner right by myself and some of my buddies. So great to see him. And shout out to the guys in the Gold Ice ticket office as well. I think it was Will who had a bone picked to me. Apparently, I had inadvertently missed him saying hi at a Moose game, and it came off badly. Yeah, everyone knows that I'm not that guy. Well, listen, I would never do that. So a special shout out to the gang in the Gold Eyes ticket office, Will and the gang. It was great stuff. Series win for the Gold Eyes, and mostly just a beautiful, beautiful time to be out there. Had a few 1919s. I had the Ukrainian platter, the pierogies and kubasov. That's still number one on my list. But I will be providing an update. We're going to do a video review of the nacho helmet. And by the way, Remo, Gold Eyes fans have already bought up all of the beer bats.
They're sold out?
They sold out of beer bats, but Andrew Collier has said they've doubled the order. They're coming in this week. So for the next homestand, a very, very popular addition to the lineup over at the Gold Eyes game. And then, of course, Valor FC yesterday afternoon, another Gold Eyes game yesterday afternoon. And too bad the team's getting out on the road, because it actually does look like we're going to be into the 20s and sunshine for the next little while. And God knows we need it. There's a number of things I want to get to right out of the weekend, and we certainly will get to some interesting notes from Elliot Friedman and the like on the Jets coaching search. But Remo, we're going to talk about this later on. I am still absolutely stunned at what happened yesterday in Vancouver with the Canada soccer game being canceled. I mean, the heights that we've had as a country growing, qualifying for the World Cup. I mean, it seems like one step forward and two steps back. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know all the details of it. I mean, I think we're all sort of coming to grips with what was requested and finding out more about how the Canadian Soccer Association's been running their operation. Bottom line is a terrible look for all involved, screwing a ton of fans, screwing Panama that had come all the way here to play the game. And you hope that a lot of positive comes from this. But I'll tell you, if you caught some of that press conference afterwards by Nick Bontis, the CSA president, I'm not sure this gets fixed immediately right now. And you really do wonder what this means for the Curaçao game coming up and just the overall preparation and taking advantage of all the goodwill that this team has created up until this point.
Yeah, I was following this story feverishly last night while barbecuing, because you can do that outside now because it's finally warm here. But I was shocked when I saw the tweet from Rick Westhead that this game was going to be canceled. And that's super disappointing for all the fans, people counting on income from people going to the game, people who have traveled from around BC or across the country. Very disappointing. However, I guess we've seen some mismanagement with Canada Soccer and this Canada Soccer business, and the players were trying to get answers since March. And in the letter they put out, they said they kept getting rebuffed, claiming vacations, or they just couldn't get a meeting, and this was their last resort. And as we saw in the CFL strike, that deadlines, when you get deadlines, things happen, and this was the only move the players felt they had. So I'm always going to be in support of the players, but it doesn't mean it's not disappointing. And I am curious how this goes. Sandor's got a lot more information than me, but this whole soccer business is interesting because I think they signed away a lot of, ways to generate more revenue to this Canada Soccer business. And the video, you can only watch the games on the One Soccer. I don't know how many subscribers it has. So it was going to be interesting what happens with the next game coming up, if they even play it, and how this affects their momentum heading into the World Cup.
I've said this on the show a number of times. I mean, it's difficult to be a Canadian soccer fan, if you will, when you can't see the teams play very often unless you have that service. So, I mean, listen, I know the hardos and, the really keen, fans will be getting that. But, I mean, if you want to grow viewership and introduce new people into, into the sport and into the team, you need to have these games a little bit more accessible. So that's been a huge problem. And their inability to capitalize on the success of the national teams, especially on the women's side, has frankly been embarrassing for a number of years. How many times have we talked about the inability? I mean, whether we're talking about the friends at Royal, they're just trying to get whatever Canada Soccer merchandise they had when Canada won the gold medal. I mean, can you get a Desiree Scott jersey anywhere? No, and that's a joke. So I really do hope that some positive comes out of this, but right now, very, very dark day. And we'll be talking about with Steven Sandor coming up a little later on. Bombers, of course, made all their final cuts, and they're back at practice today, getting ready for Paul LaPolice and the Ottawa Redblacks. We'll hit that with Jeff Hamilton to get his thoughts on what's happening behind the scenes with the Winnipeg Jets. And of course, we do need to get to the Stanley Cup playoffs as well as the latest. Should we get right to Trotz Watch, Reem? It's been a couple days. Everyone's already talking about it in the chat.
People are asking. That's the first question they come in. What's the latest? And we did go back to Friday. I put out a sweet. I was getting a lot of props for my thumbnail from Friday's video, Huss.
Oh, the thumbnail was. Yeah. I mean, you're an internet master right now. I mean, how it didn't even matter. It did not even matter what the content of the video was. Yeah. If you can get a picture where someone is seemingly shocked or losing it the way that you did right there.
There it is.
Like, look at.
That's how you get I want to say, like, that's how you get thumbnails. Like, you just like put your hands, like, do the Kevin McAllister from Home Alone and go like this and like open your mouth. People will click on it, and the results are yes. That had the highest click-through rate of like any thumbnail I've ever done. And that was Friday. So Friday, going back Friday, Elliot said what? The Jets are very, very serious about Trotz to the point where he thinks they haven't interviewed anyone else. And I think what we learned over the weekend is they actually have interviewed other people. Is that right, Huss?
Well, apparently, I mean, that's sort of what Elliot has said. I mean, listen, I've heard from, I had heard from people close to the organization that it seemed like many of these reports were somewhat premature. And sort of going on the line that, you know, they were all in on Barry Trotz and, you know, had been working on other plans, but hadn't really gone down those roads very much. And, you know, we did listen, let's get to it. We've got a couple clips from Elliot over the course of the weekend in conversation with Jeff Merrick from 32 Thoughts. The first one was notes on obviously Pierre-Luc Dubois and if they have got talking about a new contract with number 80 as well as the coaching search.
Kevin Cheveldayoff of Winnipeg Jets chatted with him as well. Said they have not yet started contract negotiations with Pierre-Luc Dubois. He is a restricted free agent. He talked about how they need to replenish their prospect pool, but did talk about Chaz Lucius and also Cole Perfetti. He didn't want to comment too much on the coaching search. We know the Winnipeg Jets have interviewed Barry Trotz. They have also interviewed Scott Arniel and Elliott. I believe they've also spoken to Rick Tocchet.
One other name I think to keep an eye on for Winnipeg, if it's not Trotz, would be Jim Montgomery, who played there as well as an assistant coach in St. Louis.
So that was from the game on Saturday night. And of course, we'll get to the game on Saturday night, the Evander Kane suspension and more. But then today, a little bit more from the guys on the coaching candidates for the Winnipeg Jets outside of the obvious number one preference for Winnipeg, and that would be Dolphins' Barry Trotz.
So, although Kevin Cheveldayoff at the NHL Scouting Combine did not want to comment on it when I asked him about it on, that would have been Friday morning, a couple of names that we reported on Saturday, they have spoken to Scott Arniel and they have spoken to Rick Tocchet, I believe, amongst others. Ellie, we all know that they've spoken to Barry Trotz, and you threw an interesting name out there Saturday as well.
Jim Montgomery, and I wouldn't be surprised if Montgomery is a Chicago guy potentially too. The St. Louis coaches, I've heard teams like all three of them to varying degrees. Jim Montgomery, I did not realize this, he played for the Manitoba Moose. So there is a little bit of a connection there.
All right, so Jim Montgomery is an interesting name, Remis, in that, you know, he was quite successful in Dallas and, you know, had an off-ice incident that led to him leaving the club right now, but not something that would prevent him, once he got his own house in order, from returning back to the bench. And there obviously is still some interest. And, you know, I know a lot of people probably didn't even realize that Jim Montgomery did play early on for the Moose at times. And, you know, some people will take that as a positive and some people will take that as a negative. And just before we discuss it, let's just get to this final clip because I know I'm not looking at the chat right now, but I can already hear some people going, oh, great, another guy with connections. Elliot expanded a little bit on why so often people with connections to this city or the organization often find their names mentioned. And it speaks to the uniqueness of Winnipeg as a market.
I got a note from someone I know who lives in Winnipeg, and he said that, he doesn't like that it always seems to be someone with a Winnipeg or a Manitoba or a connection that always seems to be mentioned for these jobs. Arneal obviously has a connection there. I didn't realize Montgomery has a connection there. Tocchet doesn't. So it's interesting. He'll be happy to hear a different name. And, he was asking what I thought about that. And, it's not something I reached out to ask anyone there now, but I've talked about it with people before. And Paul Maurice was a guy who didn't have Winnipeg connections, so they have gone out before. But, one of the things I've talked about with them is that in the past is that I think Winnipeg is a very unique market in the NHL. It's a small town, but it's a very passionate town about its team. The fans love their Jets. They care a lot. That passion is a great thing. I never think it's bad to have fans who are rabid about your team.
And creative.
And
some of the most creative fans in the NHL.
Its climate is unique. Is that a polite enough way for me to say it?
Cold?
It's a fishbowl. And, the Jets have felt at times that it takes a person to really understand what they're getting into to go there. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that if you're not used to it, it can be a big adjustment. And I think that's why the Jets have a real partial lean to people who either are from there, like Trotz is, or have had experience being there, like Arneal has, or Jim Montgomery would have. And, it doesn't necessarily mean they go in that direction. Maurice is an example of where they changed it. But this is such a huge offseason for them. This is such a big hire for that team that I do think they look at it and say, okay, we can't, I don't know if risk is the right word, but we have to make sure that the person who comes here will understand the situation that they're getting into and the market they're going to. And so, look, I don't think that means you should shut out other good candidates, like, say, a Rick Tocchet, as you mentioned. But I think if it comes down to someone who you think will be more comfortable in the environment that they're going into, I don't think that's a wrong thing to look at.
All right, so that's an interesting take from Elliot Friedman. And listen, there's a lot of truth in that. There absolutely is. I mean, as someone that worked for the organization for a long time and knows the challenges that they had. There were so many challenges going in 2011. I mean, turning things around as quickly as they did. And it was almost flawless. I mean, the fans stepped up, bought the tickets, and they moved over, and it had been a process. But I will say this, Reem, I don't know about you. Sometimes I think a lot, maybe too much is made of all of that. Like, I don't think for a second because Jim Montgomery played for a season or half a season here with the Manitoba Moose, he completely understands what the Winnipeg market is like in 2022 with the Winnipeg Jets. I think they might have a little more comfort with the type of person that Jim Montgomery is and how hard a worker is. But I mean, I think if you get to the point of hiring somebody, you're going down all those roads and you're ticking off those boxes, and you're not putting a contract offer in someone's face if you don't have the confidence in that. From a player standpoint, I can tell you 100% that this organization has done everything they can from top to bottom to make the players feel appreciated, to make them feel like they're working for a first-class organization and they're treated as well as any in the National Hockey League. I also think that at times, I think they've sort of bent over backwards at times for people that maybe didn't want to be here. And I'm not sure that that's a positive in the long run. I mean, you certainly want to be a place where, you people want to come and play and they're proud. But I'll tell you what, part of me thinks that if people don't want to be here, you're maybe better off not having them there. Now, that's easy for me to say sitting here talking to you every day as opposed to being a general manager. I have no doubt that Cheveldayoff's job in Winnipeg is probably one of, if not the most difficult in the National Hockey League, because of the market, because of so many things that conspire against you, not to mention all the trade, when guys that have no trade deals have Winnipeg on their lists. So there's no doubt about it that it is a real challenge, but it's also a great place to play. Certainly, I think they've got a lot of confidence in the market, the organization going forward too. And so I'm sort of mixed on all of that. I think about it more at players as opposed to a coaching sort of thing. But it was interesting. I just don't think that that's going to be what puts a guy like Jim, like if Jim Montgomery's the next coach of the Winnipeg Jets, it should be because they think that of the players and coaches available to them, he's the best guy for the job and get the best results out of the team that they have right now.
I've been muted this whole time. Jim Montgomery, 67 games with the Manitoba Moose of the IHL in 99-2000, so you can put him at the top of the list. One thing I do think, I agree with you, especially for players, and we've seen it with free agents, unrestricted free agents. Restricted free agents, I think they've actually had a pretty good track record at keeping a lot of their guys, but I think it's a lot harder than we think to bring people in for a number of reasons. I mean, the climate, it's not that big city, but I think there are reasons that are redeeming that, drive to the rink is 5 minutes for most people. I think they value that, good place to raise a family. It's beautiful here in the summer, as we've seen us.
Let's get the in-person interviews happening right now. I think we've got about 2 weeks of good weather out of the 52.
So we've gone from very, very in on Trotz to, Jim Montgomery, Tocchet, and Arneal are options. We did gloss over, they mentioned that first club, Pierre-Luc Dubois, no negotiations have started. Seems like this one could be a while, as the deadline, is until training camp.
You know what, that often happens with RFAs. Now, it is my belief, and again, this is just me, that I think the Dubois contract is one of many things that are somewhat intertwined. Some player movement. Listen, if I'm Pierre-Luc Dubois, I'm far more likely to sign, a long-term contract if I kind of know. Well, ironically, many of the things that Mark Scheifele said at the end of the season, for a guy with 2 years left on his deal, I think really do apply to Pierre-Luc Dubois. Wants to know what the direction of the team is, who's going to be coaching it, what his position will be. And I think at the same time, potential moves, is he the guy that's going in as that number one guy, for next year? Presumably if Mark Scheifele is not in the mix. So I think all of that had to come. Now, I do know, speaking with someone at the Jets, that Dubois was taking some time vacationing in Europe after finishing the World Championships. I think he's coming back in the next week or so. And at that point, I would imagine that there will be some talks. But like we've seen with Kyle Connor, with Patrick Laine, sometimes these RFA deals take a while, a while to make happen. And I'm not sure that the rest of the Winnipeg Jets business can wait on Pierre-Luc Dubois. But make no mistake about it, they'll be talking very soon. And once that happens and we get a little bit of reporting on it, or hopefully we just find out that there's a press conference or maybe a tweet come out that, Pierre-Luc Dubois signed a deal. The huge question about that is whether it's going to be a shorter term deal, whether the Jets can get his name on a long-term deal at 6 or 7 or 8 years and have him be one of the cornerstone pieces with a significant pay raise over the course of this summer.
Yeah, speaking of Dubois and vacation, he's been keeping up on his Instagram story. This is the time of the summer where it's off-season Jet Watch. Who's posting what on Instagram? I know Jansen Harkin's posting some videos of boats, but this is where Dubois is right now. I don't know where this is, but it looks lovely. Sorry, podcast. Listen.
That's how we get our little taste of Europe, folks. A quick hit on an NHL player's Instagram story in the off season. Remo, I know you've got lots to say about the Kane suspension or lack thereof. We'll get your thoughts on that in a minute. But we've got Dave Poulin coming up in just a minute. Hey, we're going to be heading out to Aikens Lake. I want to say in about 2 months from right now, They're already pulling some big ones out of the lake. We've got tons of extra water. That's okay, though. There seems to be lots of extra fish as well right now over at Aikens. If you're thinking about an incredible 5-star fly-in fishing getaway where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from Winnipeg, Aikens Lake is the place for you. Best thing about it is the people there, though. Find out more at aikenslake.com or hit our friend Pitt Tarrant up on Twitter at Aikens Lake for more information on availability this year and next year as well. Hey, our friends at Wallace & Wallace are Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialist. Whatever kind of fence you need, they've got you covered. Vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood. And if it's time to replace your garage door, the experts at Wallace & Wallace have Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. They'll be happy to arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. Just give them a call at 452-2700. Or you can also check out their showroom on Lawson Road off Kenaston or visit them at wallacefences.com. We got some big events. Time to put the suits on, gentlemen. We got weddings. I know Remis had a bar mitzvah on the weekend. We've got the big Rady dinner coming up in a couple weeks with Emmett Smith coming in. So you're definitely going to need to get the suits out. If you've been negligent on that throughout the pandemic, get on down to F Apparel. Custom suits for men starting at just $400. And it's a great time to get out there. Over 250 new patterns, fabrics, and more available for the summer. And again, if you've got a wedding party, 15% off for the entire wedding party if you get it over at F Apparel, 190 Smith Street downtown, or hook up with Andrew, the guys online, or make an appointment at F. That's EPHapparel.com. And just before we bring Dave in, I want to give a big thanks to our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market, who have always been providing great prices on Winnipeg's best selection of natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries for decades here as the leaders in the industry. But I've also got some great delicious lunch options. Pop into the grab-and-go deli for Vita Market salad, soup, sandwiches, and more. Maybe bring some of that falafel salad home as well. And hey, if you're barbecuing, some delicious options, very healthy for you, including lean bison steaks or chicken. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, or check out their brand new fully shoppable website online at myvita.ca. All right, great weekend in the National Hockey League. We've got one series that could be over tonight and some life in the champs. Let's welcome in TSN Hockey's Dave Poulin. Poulin, how are you? How was your weekend?
Terrific. A little hockey-centric still. And a little afternoon till yesterday. And I worked for Saturday night. Worked Friday night as well, actually, and Thursday night. But it's a little more doable now. With one game a night, you can watch it in a different way. And when there were 4 games a night at all different times and you were getting them every night, I mean, it's coming at you so fast and furious that you have a hard time distinguishing what's even going on. And you're digesting so much and trying to get into the nuances. But now with 4 teams left, I'm doing the same thing the teams involved are doing on the nights they're not working. They're watching the other game. And it's been fun. It's been entertaining. I think the hockey's been great. I think the scoring, even in a 3-2 game, I think the shooters are a little bit ahead of the goalies right now. And I know we had a well-goaltended game yesterday with Tampa and New York, but I really think that the passing and the shooting and the skill level is so elite right now that the goalies have a little catching up to do.
Well, we may as well start with yesterday's game. Listen, I've been so impressed with what the Rangers have done. And we had Anthony Botetto, our old friend, on last week. And he said, following the Rangers, religiously throughout the series, he thought that game number 1 was their best performance of the entire playoffs up until this point. Now, I do think there was some rust on Tampa, but hey, they came in and showed that they were up to the task in game number 2. And then had a 2-0 lead yesterday. Well, what were you thinking when it was 2-0, Dave? I mean, did you think that this Rangers team was on the verge of the stranglehold? And listen, they're 2-time champions for a reason. We saw that championship pedigree last night with really their season on the line because we know how difficult it is to come back from 3-0.
I've underestimated New York the whole way through. I underestimated them against Pittsburgh. I underestimated them against Carolina. And even in this series, even up to 0, I felt like Tampa was coming back. And I felt like it off the strength of their 5-on-5 play in game 2. It's funny, Anthony thought game 1 was their best. I thought game 2 was their best when they hung on at the end to win, because you have to win different ways. And slugging it out at the end, because at the end of that second game, Tampa was coming full force. And they were hitting on every cylinder they had. And they couldn't get one past Shesterkin at the end. And so I'm really impressed with the job that Gerard Gallant has done there. And I think, this is a stray comment maybe, but if you're a Montreal fan, you've got to feel pretty good about Jeff Gorton right now and the way he built that New York team, because it's only February of 2018 when they came out with that letter that said, pain is on the way. Now they got some accelerators in there, and they got the accelerator of Artemi Panarin, who chose to sign there, and Adam Fox, who wanted to play there. And so they got some things that sort of catapult them ahead, but they're a really good hockey team right now, and they're playing very well. And yet I feel like they let one get away yesterday with Tampa, because now Tampa's got, I think, the same resurgence they had against Toronto in Game 6, and now they're going to be really tough to handle. As well as New York has played, they've relied on their power play a lot. I believe 16 power play goals is the number that they've got. So you got to stay out of the box against them. But they're coming hard, and they're fast, and they're good. That Adam Fox, Andrew, he's a special player. And, it's still, if it's possible to win in Norris quietly, that's what he did last season. And yet, boy, he's noisy right now in his own subtle way. Great with the art of deception, looks people off, finds space, finds lanes. The pass to Kako on the one goal was just a crazy pass, because seconds later, he'd been on the other side of the ice and set Lafreniere up. So it's been a fun series, but I still think Tampa's going to be the team that comes out of that one in the East.
Dave, especially in Game 1, but we've seen it throughout these 3 games. I've been amazed at how the Rangers are able to find space in the slot for these cross-ice passes that are ending up behind Vasilevsky. I mean, is it something that they are doing particularly well, or is Tampa, for lack of a better word, leaving an open space for them and they're just taking advantage of it?
I think there's 2 things happening. One is the skill level of the people making the passes. But 2, and you'll appreciate this with your affinity with the Bombers, I think the receiver's doing a really good job, not just the quarterback. And a lot of times you'll say, okay, the receiver's standing still and he's easy to cover. But I think the movement you're getting of the receiver, and often it's Zibanejad, north and south within the zone, and just so he's creating the seam that a Panarin or a Fox is finding. And, when I ran my hockey school when I was a college coach, one of the first things I would do is I'd bring a football out on the ice, and I'd have everybody drop their gloves and their sticks and get used to catching passes. And if I was a quarterback and my arm was cocked back, every kid on the ice would have his hands up like this, ready to catch the pass. And I would emphasize, now, why would you skate around with your stick up off the ice then? And why would you not be ready for a pass all the time when the puck carrier has the puck? And I think that's what New York is doing exceptionally well. It's not one place, so you can't cover one place. He's not standing right on the dot. He's moving very well as a receiver. And I think that's why they're creating as many seam passes as they are.
Well, and it wasn't a seam pass, but the winner yesterday by Palat. A brilliant back pass by Nikita Kucherov. And you want to talk about being the receiver that's ready for it. I don't know how you would be expecting that, but to your point, Dave, he was ready. It was on his stick for a millisecond, and the next thing you know, it's behind in that final minute, and Tampa Bay's right back in the series. What a goal.
So you think about 2 goals, the one that he put on Ross Colton's tape with 3 or 4 seconds left in the game that won it, and then that little deflect that it's so subtle. And, Kucherov is an interesting guy to watch, Andrew, because I think from a coaching standpoint, you could get so frustrated with him because he's so deft in his delivery and the way he moves that he looks like there's not a lot of effort there. And it's amazing, the talent level. But even when he cranks it up a notch, like he did yesterday, going boards to boards, he doesn't look like when Braden Point's going board to board, you're like, holy, here he comes. When Kucherov is like, and then all of a sudden he's there. And so I think that flash speed that is an elite hockey player. His playoff numbers are just phenomenal. And Palat is part of that that layer that we talk about with Tampa, where it's a bunch of guys who've been together for a whole long time. And I was the recipient of them in when I was running the Marlies back in 2012, I believe, when we lost to Norfolk 4 straight in the championship in the Calder Cup. And it was Palat and Johnson and Panic that were doing it there. And Coop was coaching that team. And so I've watched far too much of him for far too long. He's just such a pro and such a layer that you need. He doesn't attract attention like the other guys do. You know, you're not saying, oh, what about that superstar Palat? But what an important part of their hockey club.
Well, tonight, Dave, could be the last stand for the Edmonton Oilers, down 3-0. The game on the weekend, I mean, you get the dream start, McDavid right away. It's still tight later on. And listen, I'll give Mike Smith a lot of credit. He did make some big saves, but much like we talked about in the Calgary series, it seems like there's one stinker a game, and you just simply can't do that against the Colorado Avalanche. What did you make of the performance of the Oilers at home with the great atmosphere that was there in Edmonton? And what do they have to do to at least get this thing back to Colorado and see another day?
I think start the exact same way they started, but then they've got to stay out of the box, because you shoot Connor McDavid out of a cannon off that bench and he scores 38 seconds into the game and you're on your heels. And I know the coach said that, well, you know, the Kane penalty, we killed it and it was a big momentum builder. Well, it might have been a big momentum builder to kill the penalty, but he also had 97 on the bench for almost the whole 5 minutes. He killed a small portion of it. And then Nurse took the over the glass penalty and you had him sitting on the bench for another 2 minutes. So you can't build. Yes, you got momentum from the kill, but it's not offensive momentum coming off the goal. And that's where you've got to get a couple of goals ahead of Colorado and see what happens. And, you know, and they've got to keep testing Francouz to a different level. I don't think anybody really knows about this goaltender. You know, he's had a couple of years. He's 32 years old. He's had a couple of years where he's been good during the regular season, but he had that really struggle against Dallas a couple of years ago in the bubble, if you remember. I think Michael Hutchinson finished that series. And so what an opportunity for Edmonton to light him up, but they didn't early and they took themselves out of the game, and then Colorado settled in. And the other thing, Andrew, that I think Colorado's doing really well is they're skating with McDavid and Draisaitl, if that's even possible. But if anybody's going to do it,
possible for Cale Makar.
Well, what a special skater. We talked about Adam Fox and, you know, another right shot defenseman, and not overly big. He's bigger than Fox is, I think, but just a special player. But you got to give a lot of credit to that partner too, Devon Taves. And everybody cringes when you see a guy who's traded for 2 second-rounders and ends up being the player that he is. And kudos. And I know I've done this in the past with the Jets scouts and talked about the coordination between pro and amateur scouts and the importance of making trades like a Neil Pionk. And that's what Taves is. I mean, you know, they stole him. And then you've got what you've had happen now in a weird twist of injury fate is when Gerard went out. I think the game that he went out, I believe Berard played about 13 minutes. Since that point, he's been 19 or 20 minutes. And he's a guy that can skate with those two guys, which means they were, if you watch now, they used Taves on the right side with Berard on the left side if they didn't get their Taves-Makar matchup. And I think it's really good coaching because you've got guys on the ice that can skate with those speedsters. And, you know, you're not shutting down McDavid, trust me, but you're skating with them, and they'll turn and skate forwards with him. And that Cale Makar, man, is he a special player? Holy smokes.
It's so funny you bring that up. I mean, I've had at least one conversation with buddies at the bar top about Devon Taves for the last week. Like it's a nightly topic as to like just how good this guy is. And then, of course, we get back to that trade. Now, I do understand that he was an RFA at the time, and obviously Lou was having a tough time, or it didn't seem like it was going his way. But I mean, for a player like that to be traded to the Avalanche of all teams for 2 second rounds seems like an absolute heist. How do they trade him for what they got? I mean, is that just Lou taking a stand saying, hey, you want too much, you're out of here?
I think there's a couple of factors going on. You had Pelech and Poulin, okay? So you had your big, tough physical defenseman. You had Noah Dobson coming. You had Scott Mayfield on a really good contract. And you just looked at purely dollars and cents and said, you know what? We have parts that can replace this. Maybe they thought Sebastian Aho, the other Sebastian Aho, was going to be a factor there. We have pieces that we think can do it for the money. But it's not, my thinking is that they didn't shop them, because if they shopped them, and I say that, sometimes you just keep bugging a team for a player, Andrew. Like when you're talking to a GM, and every time I would talk to Lou, I'd end the conversation and say, hey, if you're going to ever move that Taves kid, don't even bother calling anybody else. Call me. We'll get the deal done. It'll be no issue. You won't have to shop them. I got a deal for you. Trust me. And that's what you do with players you like. And those conversations go on all the time. And people would probably shudder to think that, well, they didn't think about trading that player, but somebody's called about him so often and bugged the GM about him so often that finally he relented, and the thought popped into his head. And he said, well, I know Colorado's called about him a bunch. Let's see what they got. And they had 2 seconds, and I got the deal done, because that was under the radar. And I focus on partners probably more than most people do, because I think if you show me a great defenseman, I'm going to show you a great partner. And, I played with a guy that I feel was one of the best in the history of the game, and that was Brad McCrimmon, the dearly departed Brad McCrimmon, former Brandon Wheat King, who, if you look at the D he played with in his career, Andrew, first of all, he started with Ray Bourque in Boston, and then he went to Philly and he played with Mark Howe. And then he went to Calgary and he played with Gary Suter. And then he finished up with Hartford with Pronger and Detroit with Lidstrom. Like, how do you even play with 5 guys like that? And there's such a thing as a perfect partner. And I thought Brad was that partner, because he was a little tougher physically, obviously, than Taves is, in a different time in the game. But he could skate, he could join the play, so they can't just focus on Makar, because Taves will take off. And Makar knows that if he takes off, somebody's got his back. So I look for the partner a lot if I see a great defenseman, because I know somebody else on the ice is doing a lot of the work.
Dave, I have to ask you, just going back to a trade call or just regular management call with Lou Lamoriello. What was it like dealing with Lou Lamoriello? And is he sort of unique, or is there a group of guys that, would have the reputation as maybe a harder bargain? Or do people see a very different side of him publicly that you guys would when you're on the phone talking shop and doing your jobs?
Yeah, so I never wore the GM hat in the NHL, so I never had those conversations with Lou. And that would have been Davey Nonis or Berkey at the time.
Well, what did they say about it? I would love.
Well,
I would pay to hear have a phone tap call between Berkey and Lou Lamoriello. God, that would be beautiful.
But you know that Berkey played for him when he was the head coach at Providence.
Might make the call that much better.
Coach. Berkey still called him coach when he saw him. Out of respect, he still called him coach. Hey, coach, how you doing? So I took to calling him coach too when I would see him, because I was a college coach. And it's funny, from the days of being a college coach to this day, and I got a call this morning from one of my former players and say, hey, coach, how are you? It's Ben, it's like your coach. And so I think to those guys, to Ron Wilson and those guys that played for Lou Lamoriello in Providence, he'll always be coach. But, guys have their guys they talk to too. And Chevy would be exactly the same. You talk to everybody, but certain guys you talk to more, and your relationship is different with them. And very often, those are the guys you end up making deals with more often, because you have so many more conversations with them.
How hard is it for a new GM cutting his teeth? I mean, like, if you're a guy like you're,
can you imagine the first call?
Well, and I think about a guy like Dubas. I mean, a much younger guy that maybe has a reputation, fair or unfair, that he comes from a different background that most of these guys, like when he's calling him, might be looking at a different angle. I mean, I'd be fascinated as what it's like for younger GMs that maybe don't have the hockey life that so many of the guys that are in those present jobs do, the challenges that they have trying to build up that trust, the line of communications, and make sure that you're on an even footing with the rest of your counterparts around the league.
No question. And it's an art, and there is a level that you need, like I think a level of foundation, level of presence, and you've got to build that, in the meeting. So for me, I was much more involved in the American Hockey League, in a role of general manager. And you have to utilize the meetings, Andrew. You 4 times a year, you're together for meetings and you're in a social setting and you've got to get to know guys. That's where, like I knew Zinger from his days, all through the years when I was a college coach and each step of the way, but you get to know them on a different level when you're a peer. And, we'd be at the meetings, whether they be in Chicago or Springfield or the Hilton Head meetings. And you have to take advantage of that, whether you see him in the gym or wherever you see him. And Zinger was on that. He went through a phase where he was on that treadmill or that bike more often than he was, walking down the hallway when he went through that crazy workout regimen. And so you take advantage of those times to take the conversation to a different level personally, so the business calls are easier.
Dave Poulin with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. I've got to get this back to the Oilers, because I can tell you my entire timeline was full of pissed off Jets fans yesterday that are still sour that Mark Scheifele got 4 games last year and Evander Kane now only gets 1. What did you make of the hit, the injury to Kadri, and were you as surprised as many people around here that the natural only got 1?
I was. And I think if they had removed him from that game, because it was a minute into the game, and then given him 1, it would have been 2. And 2 in playoff parlance is 4. I would have been more comfortable with that, I think. But they left him in the game. And, in Department of Player Safety, they understand what the call is on the ice, but they make their own decisions. And, whatever happens there, they make that decision. And this is weird, but Drags pulled right away when it happened. He pulled the Brandon Hagel hit on Listerainen. I think that helped Evander Kane. I really do. Because it was pretty severe. Listerainen wasn't hurt. And when he went into the boards, the first thing I thought was, man, that would be so easy to snap a wrist. Because if you remember the way the Florida player to win, both hands were fully extended to stop himself. And I thought, wow, that would be so easy to snap a wrist or an ulna there, or forearm. And, he came out of it and he just jumped up and played. And I think that saved Brandon Hagel. And I think the Hagel hit was very likely talked about a great deal in the Department of Player Safety, because that had been a fine and that might have saved Evander Kane a little bit. But had they come out of it and said 2 games because he played the full game 2, then I would have been comfortable with that.
It does drive a lot of people crazy, because it seems like they used a new standard last year for Mark Scheifele. And then, and listen, if that was the way that things were going through and everything was dealt as harshly for dangerous plays, I think people could live with it a little bit more. But I mean, listen, I realize it's probably one of the most thankless and toughest jobs in the entire world of hockey, dealing out supplementary discipline. But there never really has been a clear standard, and that's why you have these conversations every time these things come up, not to mention the accepted difference from what is suspendable and what gets you suspended in the regular season to what happens in the playoffs, Dave.
I think there'll always be a difference, and because of the magnitude and the volume of games, but it should be the same. You're absolutely right. And this year, when the playoffs started, I think we all agreed that right at the start, it was tighter. What I think has happened, and I will give the players the respect I believe they deserve, for the most part, the players attuned to what was happening at the start of the playoffs and corrected. It was a self-correction. And that's the way you want to do it. You want to say, okay, Kelly Sutherland's ref in this game, Eric Furlat's ref in this game, Wes McCauley's ref in this game. I know exactly what I'm going to get, and I can't mess around. And that's why the best referees are the best referees, Andrew, because they don't take anything from the players. And we knew it going in. I mean, if you went in and you had a Billy McCreary reffing, and you could have a conversation with him early in the night, and he'd say, Dave, just let the guys know, and we're strict, we're right down the line here, and I'm not wavering. And so if you straighten your guys out, we won't have an issue. And by the way, I had a bunch of guys you couldn't straighten out anyway, Andrew. So you're going to tell Dave Brown and Darryl Stanley to toe the line and tell Rick Tocchet to behave? Come on. But you understood the intent, and I think coming out of the gate in the playoffs, that's why we've had games. I mean, the Oilers have only had 6 power play opportunities in this entire series, 2 a game. That's not enough for the Oilers, and maybe they have to work harder to draw the penalties. But I think it's being called well. I think that for the most part, you're always going to have exceptions, but for the most part, I think the refs have done a pretty good job.
And just on that topic, I was looking at some numbers. The Avalanche have drawn the most penalties in the National Hockey League for 5 straight years. Is that just because of the speed and skill that they
Yes.
play? I mean, literally. I mean, there is a reason for that.
Yes. Yeah, I believe it is the skill, and they're pretty disciplined themselves. And you're in a foot race more often than even think of conference winning goal. You're in a foot race in that game, right? Evan Bouchard's in a foot race to try and catch a guy who's coming out of the box. He's rested and he's going full tilt. And it's not a coincidence. If you think of their additions that they made, picture one last summer in July and Darren Helm, who's always considered one of the fastest players in the NHL, albeit in his mid-30s now, and Kyle Gano, same thing. So you're adding potentially a 10th, 11th, 12th forward who in their day were the fastest guys in the league. Now they've slowed down a little bit, but they're still elite skaters. So you've just compounded. Logan O'Connor, he's a fast skater. And you look at the speed they attack with, and we've talked about their defense as well. They all get up and go. And that speed is an intimidator, and it's a penalty drawer.
Dave, I know we got to go. People in the chat will kill me. You mentioned Rick Tocchet. He's been a guy that's been mentioned for the Jets' potential job. There has been reports that he's spoken with the Winnipeg Jets. Just quickly, a word on your former teammate and what sort of a man he would be behind the bench of a team like the Winnipeg Jets if that came to be.
Well, it's interesting because I'll give you 2 flavors of him. I'll give you his success as an associate head coach in Pittsburgh. And we used to laugh in our conversations because I called him the Phil Whisperer, because he was drilling me on Kessel because I dealt with Kessel for a number of years here in Toronto. And his ability to calm things down from the associate head coach's role and working with those great offensive players. And, it wasn't, you think that's a smooth locker room. That's a challenging locker room with Gino and the drive of Sidney Crosby and the different elements they had, the intensity of a Chris Letang. And then he had to take it in a totally different direction in Arizona and be one of the top defensive coaches in the league because that's what he had. Those are the assets he had. So I love the combination of what he's done both as an assistant and as a head coach in terms of what he's had to work with. And as much as it may be a curse going through it in Arizona, he's a much better defensive coach for it, without a question. And what we've always talked about when we've talked is communication. And Rick and I were roommates for almost 6 years, Andrew. And so you might imagine that Oscar and Felix roommate couple that we were, it was quite comical. So we had a unique relationship, but we challenged each other a great deal. Both, and he was great for me as in a back role in my captaincy role, because he could really help define problems and wasn't shy to address them at all. And I think he's carried those attributes over as a coach. So I think he's a much better coach for the exact experiences he's been through.
Poulin, you're the best. Thanks so much for doing this. I know you've had a busy weekend. We appreciate you jumping on with us today on Monday. Enjoy the games tonight. We'll catch up soon.
We didn't even get to the Canadian Open. We'll have to hit that next time through.
Who's your pick? Not Dustin Johnson.
I'm going Corey Connors, home court advantage.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Adam Hadwin had an ace last week at the Memorial. He's heating up to it. A nice result. Well, listen, enjoy the golf and the hockey this weekend, and can't wait to have you back again soon.
Always fun. Take care. Have a great day, Andrew.
There it is, the one and only Dave Poulin. You can check him on the TSN hockey panel following the National Hockey League playoffs with all our pals over at TSN. All right, we are going to get to the big story coming out of the weekend. The strike by the Canadian soccer men's national team, the canceled game yesterday against Panama. We'll do that with Steven Sandor in just a second. But a quick hydration break for our friends over at Culligan Water, the water experts in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba for over 65 years. Culligan has you covered for whatever you need. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions as well for your business. Whether it's for the home, the cottage, or work, Culligan's got you covered. They're at 1200 Sargent Avenue and online at drinkculligan.com. Busy weekend at Manitoba Battery. Got a couple of texts and tweets from Winnipeg Sports Talk listeners that popped by to see Donnie and the gang over on Logan Avenue. And why wouldn't they? Don't waste your time at Canadian Tire or Costco parking, finding your stuff without anyone really to help you. The experts will help you at Manitoba Battery. You'll be shopping local and you'll save big as opposed to the prices at the big box stores. So get the best deal in town, whether you need something for a car, a hot rod you're working on, maybe a boat, a Sea-Doo. They've got it all. You can check them out online at manitobabattery.com or give them a call at 783-8787. They'll have it ready for you. Extended hours throughout the week until 8 p.m. during spring and summer. And of course, Manitoba Battery is at 1026 Logan Avenue. Huge tent sale at Royal Sports on the weekend. If you were lucky enough to go down there and get some of those huge deals, 50% or more on thousands and thousands of pairs of shoes and merchandise. Good on you. If you missed out, don't worry. There'll be a couple more tent sales coming up this summer. And in the meantime, pop by Royal Sports 7 days a week for the best selection of licensed merchandise in town for all of your favorite teams and leagues, and a huge selection of hockey, soccer, softball, baseball, fitness, bikes as well, not to mention some great summer activities like tennis and disc golf. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway, and make sure to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale news. And hey, a big shout out to our friends at Breezy Bend. Our weekend golf report is Billy Ho got it done. Huge eagle yesterday, which really helped him out maintain his big 5-shot lead. He ended up winning by 4 over Aaron Wise to get the milkshake, the handshake with Jack Nicklaus, and win the Memorial. And of course, it is Canadian Open week. We'll have a ton of coverage on the Canadian Open in the coming days, both pre-tournament and after tee-off on Thursday in Southern Ontario. If you're looking for a great golf home, talk to our friends over at Breezy Bend. Waiting list growing for next season, but no better spot for you and your family for a long-term golfing home. Find out more. Give Corey Johnson a call over at the course, or find out more online at breezybend.ca. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more Jets as well as Bombers with Jeff Hamilton. But Hammer's doing the availability right now for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So just after that, Jeff will join us. But right now, let's head out west and get the lowdown on this bizarre situation involving the Canadian men's soccer team just weeks after our highest moment in 36 years, one of the lowest moments yesterday with the cancellation of the game against Panama. Let's go to Edmonton and welcome in Stephen Sandor. Double S. I always love talking to you, but these are sort of strange circumstances. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely strange. I mean, I think the last time we talked, we were kind of overjoyed about where Canada's men's program was, and we were talking about pinching ourselves and, not believing how well things were going in the last month and a half since this team qualified for the World Cup. I don't think you could have as bad a World Cup rollout as this country has had. I mean, it takes work, and in some ways, you have to almost kind of salute how much work it is to turn all the goodwill, qualifying for your first World Cup since 1986, and throwing it out the window in about a month and a half.
It really is stunning. And I guess the only way this could be worse is if you told us that something had happened to Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David and they weren't going to be able to play for us. Assuming that we're still going. Are we still in right now? Listen,
this just it. Alberta's separating and Alfonso's going to play for the Alberta national team.
We joke about that, but who knows what happens in the future. Listen, going into the weekend, last week the story was, okay, they booked this game against the Iranians, and for many political reasons, this game was put off, but it's important for the team to play. So, they wasn't an ideal situation bringing in a CONCACAF team, but at least they got a pretty solid Panama team to come in. That was where we left it on Friday heading into the weekend. And yesterday afternoon, you started seeing the tweets that something was up, and then this game was canceled. And first and foremost, a terrible look for all involved. Brutal for so many new fans, people that had traveled across the country to go and see this game, basically finding out that the game is off as they get to it, as they get to the stadium yesterday afternoon. And we'll talk about the implications of all of this and what this means going forward. And you had a great tweet thread yesterday. But first off, when you went off to, I know your kid was playing in baseball. Was this at all on your radar? Or was it, hey, we're going to play this game and, find out
I think the rumbling started earlier in the weekend. Obviously Friday with Canada not training it, but they're not really saying why they weren't training, because there's lots of reasons why training can be canceled. A lot of times we've seen it happen in lots of sports. I mean, every sport you covered, it doesn't matter. At some point, you'll see a practice or a training session is canceled. It's normal, and you don't really freak out and don't really think too much into it. But knowing that the players had some real solid issues with the Canadian Soccer Association and with the board and with the issue about compensation, the issue about equal compensation for the women's and men's game, and the demand for them to open the books, because since 2018, Canada Soccer has had a relationship with something called Canada Soccer Business. It's something similar that MLS had with something called SUM in the United States, Soccer United Marketing, that distributes the rights, handles a lot of the marketing, and Canadian Soccer Business, which is run by Scott Mitchell, who also is one of the people at the top of the Canadian Premier League, who is, we know from the Hamilton Tiger Cats, CFL fans will know, is administering that. And there's a whole idea of where's the money. Supposedly this accusation that almost that Canada Soccer is hiding money, and Canada Soccer is saying, hey, we barely, even by making the World Cup, we barely have enough money to cover all the programs we do, from U15s to beach soccer to para soccer and then you kind of wonder, well, what would you have done had they not qualified for the World Cup? And then it was followed with one of the most bizarre press conferences you'll see on Sunday night from Nick Bontis, the president of the CSA, where, CSA is notorious for not talking to the media about this stuff and just sending out statements through their PR people that aren't even attributed to like someone up top, that they'll say, oh, this is the PR person wrote this. But this time they just, and then we saw, I guess, on Sunday when Nick Bontis decided to meet with the media, why they do this, because it was ill-prepared to meet the media. He was still hot. You could tell he was still really angry, which you shouldn't be. You need to, and Nick Bontis has a background in business management and that kind of business coaching, and it kind of sounded like a webinar at one point, but like a really angry webinar where he used a lot of those kind of catchphrases about management. Like he talked about retention of staff and the bleed of staff, and there was a lot of big words thrown in there that sounded like he should have had a whiteboard behind him, and he was to be pointing to like graphs and charts,
slideshow presentation.
Yeah, it was kind of like and I know we've mentioned him before. It was kind of like if Tom Vu got really mad,
our guy,
and was talking about real estate, but using some really big concepts about it, but also sounding really angry and not connecting with the people at all. It was, I will say, it was about as disastrous a press conference as you can have.
The entire day. I mean, to be honest, right from the start, I mean, what a dark day for Canadian soccer history.
I guess you say it was a punctuation mark. Like it really put the exclamation mark on the day.
Now, I want to get into your tweet thread because, as I mentioned, you've been covering this game for decades. And, listen, a lot of people have been boosting this, including some of the people that are the most prominent people in the present media. But just quickly, as it goes to yesterday, what do we know about the main concerns from the Canadian players? And given the state of soccer in Canada, are they realistic? Or, some people will say, well, listen, it's great to have a couple guys playing for Bayern Munich or some of the top teams in the world. But I mean, those teams themselves probably have budgets 10 times the size of our entire nation. I mean, where do things come out, and what are the sticking points that forced this game to be canceled yesterday?
I think fans don't have an understanding that national teams do compensate players for their time that they spend at playing for the national team. And it's not necessarily the hugest amount of money, but for, let's say, a guy making MLS money, it's significant. Like, not everyone's on Alphonso Davies' contract and on that team. Really the only complaints I had heard coming up to this in the weeks leading up to it were some mentions I'd heard about players being unhappy about the arrangements for Qatar, in terms of like family being brought over, in terms of how their tickets that they were going to get for friends and family. And again, like, having to dip into the pocketbook when you're making MLS money is a little bit different than if you're making European superstar money. to finance this. Qatar is going to be a very expensive trip for a lot of people. But that's kind of the limit I heard of it. But, the players, I guess, have had this long-standing discussion about, where their compensation should be and where the money's coming from. And their accusation is, A, that they got a low-ball offer from the Canadian Soccer Association, and 2, the low-ball offer is based on numbers that aren't real. So basically, they want transparency, and they want the CSA to open the books and show them what Canadian soccer business is making too, because is that being hidden away from them? There's an accusation that the Canadian Soccer Association is probably hiding money from them. Whether that's true or not is not for me to say, but there's that accusation that they levied. They sent an open letter about that, and as well about equality in pay, which we just saw in the United States, that the U.S., after a very ugly battle that went to the courts, the U.S. Soccer Federation finally has decided the women's and men's teams will get paid equally. That is also on the table. And the women's team has come forward and said, hey, we've been fighting for this for a long time too. There's a lot of issues about compensation. Now, at the same time, as I said, going back and forth, Canadian Soccer Association yesterday said that the offer the players made on what they wanted for compensation was what, and I think Nick Bontis used, I don't know how many times I heard the word untenable yesterday, but it was untenable, and that it would basically bankrupt the organization. They can't afford it. And he said, even if we didn't run other programs, we wouldn't be able to afford it. But he talked about the other programs that the Canada Soccer has to run, has to administer.
Oh, yeah, he had the beach and
money.
the para and under 18s and under 16s
under
and all that,
15s, yeah.
which
Yeah,
for sure is part of the mandate of an organizing governing body. But also, I mean, for a unit that you would think for 36 years has been building to trying to get up to be in the World Cup, that they'd be a little bit more prepared. And listen, on this program, as a very casual fan or someone that's really gotten into it through the women's team over the last number of years, I mean, I would rail on this program that it was ridiculous. Like, we could not find a Desiree Scott jersey anywhere. Never mind here in Winnipeg. Try and get it on their website. Try and get one ever for Olympic champions. And now we've had the same conversation about Canada making the men. Now there's finally an Alphonso Davies jersey, and the Canada We Can shirts are out, but it's been slow moving. And it seemed like they were completely ill prepared for the success that was coming right now. Is that all on the CSA, or is this the deal that they cut with CSA Business? Because to be perfectly honest, I can tell you right now, guaranteed they missed out on millions and millions of dollars not being prepared to take advantage of what's happened for both our men's and women's teams over the last few seasons.
There's a lot of blame that's equally shared, especially in the jersey. And I hear you, because my daughter met Desiree Scott a few years ago and was really inspired by talking to her. I mean, it was a event, and obviously my daughter has a bit of a privileged position to be able to get back and meet the players, but she had a really great chat with her when she was very young. And she always wants, she says, I love the Destroyer, she's my favorite player on the team. Christine Sinclair is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but she's not going to be everyone's favorite player, right? Just like the people in the hometown of Winnipeg want to support her. It should not be hard to go to the Nike site or the Canada Soccer site and get it personalized with Scott on the back and the number. Just like it should be hard to go on the NHL store and get your Winnipeg Jets jersey of your favorite Jets player. And it shouldn't just be, hey, all we got are Wheeler jerseys. No, it's not like that, right? Or Hellebuck jerseys. It's like you can get any of the players, right? And just like here in Edmonton, like if I want to get a Tyson Berry jersey, it's fine. I can find one. But the thing is that we just are, that part of it falls to Nike as well. Nike kind of underestimated when they signed the deal. I mean, we have to lay some blame all around here. But I think, a lot of this is the lack of sort of marketing savvy. And soccer, the biggest problem within soccer in Canada, and always has been, since it was first around this in the 1990s, is how insular it is. You know how the soccer community, and it's terrible. They get within themselves and they get this tunnel vision. We get this tunnel vision, I should say we. Oh, it's the world's most popular sport, and almost like this arrogance about it. Like, people will come forth because all of a sudden the world will recognize that soccer is everyone in Canada is going to recognize that this is the world's most popular sport, and we will flock to it without having to do much work or marketing or grassroots work. And we will just say, Valor shall play Sunday at 1:00 and all ye shall come, because it is soccer, and bow before the great soccer. And we don't do any of the work. The lack of promotion And it has to be these kind of moments where Canada does well on the international stage, where, yeah, it's a big deal because the marketing is done for you. But the fact is, we have this dichotomy going on in Canada right now, where the national team has got all of the success. The women's team has won a gold medal. Yet MLS attendances are down. And we were just talking before, because I was asking you on the Winnipeg perspective, we know that Edmonton is being run by the league. And the last game they had, now mind you, was the same night as the Oilers night. There's around 200 fans. 200. Edmonton hasn't broke 1,000 this year for any game. Now, the team's
and
being
that's
run
a
by
city
the
with
league.
a great soccer history. I mean, when I was out there living with you guys, we saw Canada play Trinidad and Tobago.
There is such a lack of understanding and a connection in the cities. And I've heard this today after talking about this, because I've written a lot about the Canadian Premier League, and I haven't a lot lately, because this league is honestly not moving the radar. And you know what? Not a lot of people want to buy stories or talk about the Canadian Premier League, right? It's just not, so it's hard to cover it when no one wants to, like, hey, it's like when you're writing, and that's what people don't understand is, like, you don't just go there and show up. You're trying to make a career of something like that in media. You got to get a paycheck, or you have to, like, be doing it. And there's a lot of well-intentioned bloggers that tend to do this for the right reasons because they love it so much, and then they get driven out after a few months because they realize, wow, it's a lot of work. But this league has yet to connect. They had their final in Hamilton, which isn't far from Toronto, last year. And not one major media outlet sent a reporter to its final. Like, is that not a red flag? Like, that's
a red flag. There's many of them right now around this.
So, and people say, oh, there's an anti-soccer bias in media. There isn't. I've been in it. We've worked in the mainstream media. People are fine with telling soccer stories. You're fine with telling soccer stories. But the thing is that soccer makes it difficult on itself. When it's harder for me to call the Canadian Premier League to arrange an interview with a player than it is for me to call to get an interview with an NHL star or to get a call back from a major sports league. Or when I compare them to the Canadian Elite Basketball League in terms of how they treat the media and how they work with the media, it's night and day. It's night and day. And that's all part and parcel of it. But when you make yourself very difficult, you'll find that people will go to the path of least resistance. People are strapped right now in media. Staffs are down. They're this is a situation where you need to work a lot harder. You can't just assume people are going to come your way. And soccer is very insular. Soccer is they don't take a look out, and they always kind of say, oh, the soccer argument is always like people should come to this. And I think the best example is on Super Bowl Sunday. How many people in the Canadian soccer community will make these anti-football tweets? Like, they just don't like it. It's like, it's not the biggest sporting event in the world. Why are we making such a big deal of it? It's like, why don't you let people enjoy it? Right? Like, just
that's not the hill to die on. That is not.
And understand that you're not making friends. What you're trying to do, there's so much gatekeeping in soccer. There's so much of this insular stuff that it's like, oh, you're not cool enough to sit here because you don't know the history of Everton Football Club from the 19th century. It's like, stop it. It's like they make fans of, like, 1970s punk rock seem like less like gatekeepery. Like, just imagine all the record store owners you used to know when you used to go shopping for records that used to judge you by, like, you knew if you walked in the record store and you even touched anything mainstream, they would look at you funny. Just imagine all those people became sports fans, and that's soccer in a nutshell. That is what it is. It is a bunch of people who say, what do you mean you liked Nirvana after, like, never mind, they sold out, man.
Well, there is a chance to sell a lot of stuff, and it hasn't happened right now. So where are we at? What's the aftermath of this game? I mean, there's supposed to be another game on the 9th. I mean, I guess this will be something that people are paying attention to now. But I mean, how do we go forward, and how realistic is it to get some sort of conclusion to this, at least in the short term, that gets the team back on the pitch and things moving in a forward direction going towards Qatar?
I don't think they would need to have a deal, but I think they would need to have some sort of a feeling, because right now it seems it's pretty hostile. And I think one is the tone from the CSA has to be more conciliatory. It can't be like it was last night.
Well, can these guys get it? Like, I listened to the press conference, and my first reaction, I had the same reaction. I'm like, whoa, this is hot. And I can imagine they're in bad, but are these the guys that can actually get this thing done? Like, do we have the right people in place?
I think this is where you might have to bring in someone from the outside, someone in the sports, union negotiating world who's worked in that situation, but you don't have a lot of time. Now, this was a friendly, and it's bad enough because let's face it, look, if you're the Panamanian Football Federation, you were invited last second, right? So you're invited last second to this game. You know you're not the first choice, right? And then you're sitting in the hotel and you're told, well, we're not having a game. This is like you being the not popular guy in school, finally finds a prom date because the other guy dropped out. Then you get dumped on prom night, right? Right? Like, it's like you feel like a double loser, right? Like Panama, they have every right to be furious and demanding compensation for what's going on. But then moving back into the situation, this was still a friendly. It didn't mean a lot. It wasn't an official game. It was a preparation game. But the game against Curacao was an officially sanctioned FIFA game because it's part of the Nations League. So is the upcoming game in Honduras. If Canada skips that, there is ramifications where they can be thrown out of tournaments. They can be like sanctioned as an organization. It could affect all the way up to us getting these World Cup games that are supposed to be announced on June 16th. What is that look for the FIFA officials right now who are here ahead of the World Cup and seeing this? They're going like Canada's already making crazy demands, right? Like with the World Cup, like Alberta government, what they did, and it might cost Edmonton games or the games by saying, hey, we have to have this many games and we want better games than you've been offering us. Not a lot has been said from Ontario or BC regarding Vancouver or Toronto. But here you are, Vancouver's supposed to be put in the spotlight here before these announcements are made. And this happens. But if Canada pulls out of a sanctioned official game, they can get thrown out of tournaments. They can get banned. And, this is stuff that we normally associate with the worst football or soccer organizations in the world. We hear about this stuff, but I guess maybe we're there now. Like, I know, congratulations, but it has been a crazy month and a half. And I think as well, soccer, the big problem we have within soccer is this inflated sense of our self-importance. And I think this has exploded on every level because Canada's qualified for the World Cup. And I think that feeling that everyone wants a piece of this pie. Now everyone has moved into protecting their turf even more than they've had before in soccer. The divisions that have come up when they can't stand their own success is honestly nothing short of an embarrassment. It really is an embarrassment. And I don't know where the trigger on the finger is for the associations above the Canadian Soccer Association. But I would think that, the president of CONCACAF is Canadian Victor Montagliani, who used to run the Canadian Soccer Association. I think he's got to be making some calls here and saying, you got to get this done. This has got to get figured out. But it is an incredibly, Canada Soccer's had some bad stories before. I mean, the 8-1 to Honduras. I think about other really bad World Cup qualifying flameouts when the women previously threatened to walk out on games, going back about 10 years. The women, obviously some of the men's coaching carousel that we had for quite a while in the men's national team. There's been a lot of bad moments in Canadian soccer. And trust me, the people who've been around this program for a long time will have a hard time ranking them until yesterday. Now at least the clear number one is there, right? Like you gotta go, well, there's this black hole.
And to think that that's just on coming off of, the greatest victory for Canada in most of our lifetimes to get to the World Cup. Hey, you brought up before we go, I've got to ask you this. Because you talked about, I think some of the gatekeeping and whatnot that's maybe pushed some people away. But the bottom line is right now with our men's and national women's programs, they've never had a higher profile. They've never been a better spot, and Canada is going to the World Cup. It honestly seems they're fighting over a pie that hasn't yet been baked yet. How big are the challenges from a business side to get the funds coming in that probably should be there with programs as successful as they are to actually fund the things that are being asked for, like happens in most other federations?
I think like you're saying too, and I think this is a sign. You said the pie hasn't been baked yet, and I agree. And I think this shows a lot of longstanding resentments that have been getting kept quiet, right? Because it's sort of like the first, the door opens a little bit on success, and all of a sudden you feel like, all right, all of this backlog of grievances we can bring forward now, right? So this shows that this isn't a new issue. This is a backlog of grievances that have been sitting and sitting and sitting, and now that there is success, it's time to address them. And yeah, I agree. But I think as well, we don't know what the pie is because of that relationship between Canadian soccer business and Canada soccer, and where the money is. And I think that's what the players' big ask. And I think for the people who've been around the program, who care enough and been long enough, they're kind of saying, yeah, I'd like to know where this is going. But we certainly have a ton of problems in soccer in this country. Registration numbers were down before COVID. It wasn't just because of COVID. And I've said this before on your show. They're coming back now. The signs are they are coming back after COVID, which is great to see. But now we have a referee shortage. We've seen it, and I just was talking to someone in Ontario about that. But we see it in Alberta too.
Same thing here. Same thing here.
At grassroots level, we don't have enough officials in games. We don't have enough fields. There's basic grassroots stuff that needs to get addressed, and it's like we have a house that's totally broken down, and we've got a bit of money, and we have to figure out what do we renovate first. But the contractor says they want more money. Right. So and you're negotiating all of this through these crazy inflationary times where the price of everything is going up by the day. And so it is, I don't know, but I think what concerns me more isn't even so much the nature of the dollars and cents. It's the vitriol that we've seen from both sides, especially from Nick Bontis yesterday. Because if there was a lesson that we want to show people on how not to speak to the media, how not to speak to the public, that was it. That is one that goes down.
When it comes to PR and conflict resolution, it doesn't get much uglier than what we saw yesterday.
And this to me was you can't go in that angry. You gotta I can't imagine,
I wonder leaving it on how does this guy stay in the position that he is, especially considering the urgency and everything going on right now. Double S.
The reactions to when that press conference was happening, when you saw it on social media, was just kind of there's a lot of WTF.
Yeah, are you kidding me?
And there wasn't a lot of sympathy for the Canadian Soccer Association side because he didn't make the points, and he was just angry.
And they just say, "Hey, sorry, we don't have the money," and they had a big part of that is the way that it's running. Sandor, listen, we got to run here, but I will make a point of hopefully hooking up with you in the next week or so, and maybe we'll have some better news to talk about. But
maybe we'll have a happy press conference to talk about, or one that was calm. But I don't know. That one deserves a dramatic reenactment. I don't know.
No doubt. Hey, thanks so much for the time as always, buddy.
All right, thanks a lot.
Great stuff from Steven Sandor. And as I said, this is going to be a story. Certainly, if you're throwing SportsCenter on today, it'll be a massive story, probably number one, in addition to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it'll be something we'll continue to monitor heading into the Curacao game, which still has plenty of good tickets available for the 9th of June. And I guess a big question mark, when you burn as many fans that got burned yesterday, how many are going to decide that they'll give it another crack? Certainly hope that there's not too much damage from this going forward. All right, Jeff Hamilton coming up in just a second. Big thanks to our friends over at Not AutoCorp for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hey, if you're looking at getting into a new whip for the summer and beyond, start your search over at Knot. Why not get into the car of your dreams at an incredible price with the help of the Knot team? Was just over there on the weekend. Some phenomenal vehicles on the lot, including a number of Teslas. And again, if you're thinking about making the switch to electric, find out everything that's involved with the Tesla Experience program over at Knot Auto Corp. Pop by and see him. Tell him your boys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. Waverly in McGillivray, and you can check them out online at knot.ca. Oh my God, Little Brown Jug was a zoo this weekend. Huge Pride parties. Of course, they're a huge supporter of Pride Winnipeg. And the queer beer was being poured on the weekend. That, of course, one of their most popular new brews for this summer, along with their new cider, Saison, Hefeweizen, and Folkfest Lager. Stop by the tap room or patio to try one of their delicious new brews. Pick it up at your local beer store. And don't forget, Friday, June 24th, live show for those of you that might be able to get away on a Friday afternoon. Pop down and join us at Little Brown Jug. You can try all the great brews for yourself. We'll do the show up until 3 on a Friday afternoon, and probably kick it and have a few with some friends and listeners after the fact. Of course, Little Brown Jug down on William Avenue in the Exchange. I know Nick and Nikki DQ were busy on the weekend. The sun is shining. The summer is here. And that means it's always blizzard season, but it's especially blizzard season right now. Pop by to any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs and try one of those royal blizzards as well. I can't wait to get my hands on one of those with a chocolate or peanut butter filling. And when you're there, also, if you're hungry, don't hesitate to jump on those new stack burgers, which have revolutionized the fast food burger game. Nick and Nikki DQ, DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. Pop by today and enjoy yourself. And it's about time to start talking Bombers. And of course, all of our Bomber reports all year long are brought to you by our friends at Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers home opener this Friday. And make sure you get out early and take part in all the festivities outside the stadium in the Princess Auto tailgate zone, including our pal DJ Finesse, who will be spinning tracks, great beer specials as well. Of course, Princess Auto, also a great sponsor of the Gold Eyes, and the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. They're at Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. Of course, their national headquarters is here in Winnipeg, but you can also shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. All right, fresh off the weekend and Bomber practice and availability today, our guy Jeff Hamilton for the Winnipeg Free Press joins us now. Hammer, what's going on? How was the weekend?
Haas, weekend was good. I actually had 4 days off, which is rare. So it was an extended weekend for me, but all things considered, it was awesome. I took advantage of the weather. I don't know if you know this, but I think you might. I'm a big garage sailor, so got out there on the waters this weekend.
That's right. Pick up any like how much junk have you acquired over the course of the years at these things? Actually, that's what I'm interested in.
I'm out there. Yeah, junk I've acquired. It's funny you say that because I thought about creating a website calling it Jeff's Junk. But yeah, nothing crazy. Just this last go around, I didn't realize Tom Hanks wrote books, or at least got into fiction. So I found this Tom Hanks book for $1, which was awesome. And I bought 2 hats. I find that I buy nice. Jeff hit the waters this weekend. And I buy like vintage like hats, lids that I use for the summer. So I picked up a couple of those. One says, check before you dig or whatever. And they're never used. They're all new. They're just kind of funny. A little bit of a topic of conversation amongst me and my colleagues whenever we're out covering Bombers. So overall, pretty good weekend.
I'm going to need to remember to ask you about the garage sale scene every Monday or Tuesday when we have you on. And I'll tell you what, there might be 1 or 2 weekends of the year where I might be able to get up early enough on a Saturday where we don't have a show to actually come with. I'd like to have an expert garage sailor show me the ins and outs.
There's nothing like a seasoned garage sailor to go out with to really bring out the experience. Huss, I'll extend the invite to you right now.
I'll buy breakfast at Sal's. I'll buy breakfast at Sal's.
Yeah, exactly. So there are some rules. We're out on the waters by 9, so you don't want to go any later than that. But if and when we plan this, I'll make sure you're caught up to speed.
Good stuff. All right, listen, I do want to get into Bombers mostly with you. Of course, Cuts, first week of the season. But just before we do that, I mean, we were listening to what Elliot Friedman had to say about the Jets' continued coaching search. I mean, what are you hearing? I know you've been knocking on a lot of doors and picking up the phone quite a bit lately, coming off your reporting of last week. What are you hearing as to where things stand right now?
It's still eerily quiet. It's waiting, for, particularly in the Jets situation. Barry Trotz remains their number one guy. There's no surprise to that. They've done, a couple different interviews. These situations are so fluid. They're so, a lot of moving parts. Interviews can happen over the phone. They don't all need to be formal interviews. There's a process of figuring out who, growing and deleting your list, really. I mean, there's some people who just aren't interested, even though there's not a lot of jobs, head coaching jobs in the National Hockey League. Sometimes it doesn't fit certain guys' plans or interests. So, I mean, at this point, I mean, it really is waiting on Barry Trotz. I get this feeling that something's going to happen in the next couple of days. Now, I'm not trying to launch out a deadline for here over the next 48 hours, but time's of the essence for a lot of teams, not just the Winnipeg Jets, but particularly the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, Barry Trotz has, his right to handle it, take as long as he wants with the process. Now, that doesn't apply to the teams. They don't have to wait. They can certainly move on and make his decision for him. But you have to think, given how long he's been on the open market, given how, the teams that he's talked to, this shouldn't be a much longer drawn out process. And I just get the feeling here over the next couple of days that we're going to get some clarity as to maybe not necessarily who the Jets coach is, maybe, but certainly, start seeing some names come off the boards as teams pull the trigger and decide, have to start getting things done. Like, as I said, with the Winnipeg Jets, I mean, they need to hire a coach. And here's the other interesting thing about the coaching situation in Winnipeg, and any situation, but particularly here in Winnipeg, is, if they do hire a guy like Barry Trotz, I think you're going to start see some major roster change. I think Barry Trotz, if they can acquire Barry Trotz, I think you start looking at trades for some higher end offensive players, whether that's Mark Scheifele, whoever it could be. And the reason I bring that up is because we know the style in which, the Jets know the style in which Barry Trotz, puts out his team, and you don't need a bunch of guys. So what I've been kind of hearing that is if Barry Trotz is the guy, if he does decide to come to Winnipeg, I don't want to say buckle up, but this draft could be pretty interesting as far as trade potential, because if you bring another coach in, say a Kirk Muller or, Scott Arniel or whoever, who's on the Jets list, I don't think you're going to be needing as much roster change. So just all that considered, I mean, the Jets have a lot of work to do.
Some might argue that based on last season, that roster change is necessary regardless of who the head coach is.
Absolutely. But I mean, I just don't think it's as drastic given the style in which some coaches want to play versus the style in which Barry Trotz plays. I'm not suggesting that, nothing happens if someone other than Barry Trotz gets on, but I just think if you are a Barry Trotz coach team, I think your options actually, as far as roster movement, actually expand. They actually create more opportunity to trade because of the style in which, first of all, some of which he wants them to play, and then the style in which some players might not be interested in playing, right? So there's that intrigue. But like I said, I'm expecting something to give, whether it's over the next few days or this week, because time, we're just getting to that point where time's of the essence for everybody.
We were listening to a couple reports from Elliot Friedman from over the weekend and this morning. And one of the things he said, which is not a surprise, I sort of knew that Pierre-Luc Dubois was spending some time vacationing in Europe after the World Championships. And, he's fired out a few neat pictures on his Instagram story of what he's been up to. But they haven't spoken yet. Where do you think that is? I mean, I think it's quite clear that right now the head coaching search is dominating the to-do list for the general manager. But do you think they try and really press and get something done before the draft or before some of these moves are made? Or is that something that's going to probably wait a little bit later on into the summer post-draft?
Well, a couple different things with Pierre-Luc, particularly, around time. I mean, if I'm Pierre-Luc Dubois, do I really want to sign, a long-term deal a team that doesn't know who their head coach is yet. I mean, this is a guy who's had documented issues with head coaches. I think he wants to know who's going to be working the bench for the foreseeable future before he, puts his signature on some long-term deal. And then I think it comes down to the money in which, one, the Jets are willing to pay. We know that they like Pierre-Luc Dubois. We know that they like to, what he brings to the table, whether that's, both on and off the ice. We also know that the Jets don't like shelling out a ton of money. So, all those things considered, I really do think this is, I don't, whether the Jets
they've been a cap team. I mean, what do you mean they don't like? I mean, they paid for players. I mean,
they paid for players. They're just not, no one makes more than $9 million. You know what I mean? They like, and I'm not saying that Pierre-Luc Dubois is all of a sudden a $9 million player. I'm just saying that if you're looking at, long-term deals, I mean, there's not a lot of 8-for-8s in there, and maybe he would take 8-for-8. My point is, it's less about, even in that comment, I mean, it's less about what the Jets are willing to pay him per se. I'm sure dollars are not adding up between the both sides as they often are. That's not exclusive to Pierre-Luc Dubois and his negotiations. All players think they're worth more than, teams usually want to pay. I just think it's right now, I think there's real concern if you're the Winnipeg Jets and Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like, he was in that dressing room all last season. The Jets know the issues that were in the dressing room. They, how much fun did Pierre-Luc Dubois have? Is he ready? What does the leadership group look like? Is it going to be, is he going to get an opportunity to wear a letter? Is he going to be able to, he shouldered a lot of the leadership duties last season on and off the ice. So, is he going to be recognized for that? Is something going to give? I mean, obviously something's not good with Mark Scheifele. Has that changed over the last, week, months here? Maybe not. I have heard that the talk to Mark, and I heard the press is more so less about dealing him and more talking about how important he is. And is that because Pierre-Luc Dubois hasn't committed? If I'm Pierre-Luc Dubois, I'm not committing to the Winnipeg Jets until I have a few answers here. But, and the number one's the head coach, two's the direction, and what the roster is going to look like. Because the reality is this, Hustler, if you look at what he did with his contract, I mean, there's an annual average value of each contract, but the qualifying offer goes on the money in the last year of the deal. Well, if he gets a qualifying offer, it's going to be over $7 million. If he goes to arbitration, right, there's going to be about $7.5 million. He's probably going to say 8, or more. The team's going to probably say the qualifying offer is good, and they're going to meet somewhere in the middle. So does he want to do that? The reality is he doesn't really have to sign some crazy long deal. We don't know the salary cap, what that's going to go up. It kind of feels like a crazy time for a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois to sign a long-term deal when you take into consideration, his bargaining rights right now. I mean, he's going to be making north of 7 next year, regardless if the Jets sign him to a long-term deal or not. He could very likely wait out the next 2 seasons. Much like we saw with Jacob Trouba, right? I mean, this is, he's got a lot of opportunity here, or, I think Jets fans would like is him to get a better opportunity to see what this team looks like with a little bit more structure, whether that be through coaching, a little bit more cohesiveness amongst the players, and then make the decision. I just think if I'm Pierre-Luc Dubois, I'm not rushing to put my signature on a long-term deal if I believe A, I can get more money, or B, I don't think this is the right place for me. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we find ourselves.
You are right. I mean, there's certainly a number of advantages in the player situation because of the term of the contract, the years remaining under team control. And, I think that, will force the Winnipeg Jets to make a very aggressive offer that, covers a lot of those bases beforehand, that he's going to get paid well, he played what he's going to be. He'll have some contract security going forward. But you're right. There are some things other than money. And the reason why I sort of bring that up in and around the draft, and you sort of alluded to it, like, is he the number one center next year? Or is he sort of playing second fiddle behind Mark Scheifele? Now, that changed quite a bit under Dave Lowry, I would suggest. But again, there's still a number of questions. And as far as everything kind of behind the scenes, we can only spend some time speculating, which I'm sure many people have a lot of fun doing, but at the same time, it's not really probably responsible to be getting into that as much as there's a lot of personalities involved in this.
Well, and yeah, exactly. I mean, and to your point, Huss, I mean, okay, so if things aren't going to plan as planned with a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois, do you circle back to Mark Scheifele and make him feel better? I mean, that's very much a possibility. I mean, it's an interesting, fascinating, whatever adjective you want to use for this.
But you can say that. I still like when we talk about Scheifele, his situation just seems so different than me, because I think the Jets as an organization from top to bottom have been bending over backwards for Mark Scheifele for a number of years. And this is where they got them. I mean, I've said this before, like, if you're trading him somewhere else, like I don't imagine any scenario where he is the golden boy, the franchise player, the unquestioned number one center, the guy that no matter what's happened is going to be rolled out for 23, 24 minutes a night. I mean, the Jets have done everything they possibly could post signing the contract, and we know there's no renegotiations to appease their number one center. And we saw what happened over the last couple seasons. So,
yeah, I mean, and that very much could be true. I mean, obviously, whatever we perceive that the Jets have done for Mark Scheifele, maybe he doesn't feel the same. Maybe he feels like he's done more for the team than they've done for him, or there's lots of different things. But at the same time, Mark Scheifele is a quality player. He's a guy that, I'm not so sure, certainly if he played the way he played in the back half of last season, or much of that season, just not from a point scoring perspective, but just from a guy who, wears a letter and needs to be a leader on the ice to play that 200-foot game. Yeah, maybe not all that much appeal to teams, but I'll tell you what, I mean, you don't have to dig far into this guy's resume to see how important he is to an organization. And maybe, after GMs also know that I don't want to say wear out your welcome, because that's not the situation, I think, with Mark Scheifele here. But
sometimes guys need a fresh start.
Sometimes guys need a fresh start. Some need a change. And guys know that, GMs who have been in this business long enough know what a fresh change can be. And if you look at a guy like Mark Scheifele, that, certainly you could have questioned his effort on the ice at times, particularly to the defensive game, or particularly to the team's structure in which Dave Lowry wanted them to play. But you can't question this guy's commitment. You know what I mean? This guy's committed to hockey off the ice. And you hope it translates on. So I don't think there's going to be a shortage of suitors. I think the big fear in Winnipeg is losing this trade. I don't, I think you need to get back a lot. I mean, not only do you have a very good centerman, you have a very good centerman with 2 years at a very fair contract, below what he, is what he's worth. So, you want to get something key in return. And I think you want more than just draft picks. I think you want a real player back. And I think
no doubt
the Jets can identify, whether that could be more forwards. I don't know if that's their interest per se, but, they certainly could use, a top end bona fide defenseman backwards in that trade. So there's only X amount of places that have that. And usually they, much like the Pierre-Luc Dubois and Patrick Laine trade, you needed 2 stars on their respective team to be unhappy with their current circumstance. So now you're going to have to go find out who's unhappy with theirs, or maybe there's a team out there that's willing to give away, a top end defenseman. But I'll tell you what, as much as centermen, top end centermen are coveted, so are top end defensemen. So it's just as much as there's value possibly in the Mark Scheifele trade, certainly there's value. You wish there was a bit more value on Winnipeg's end. You need to at the very least tie that trade. You can't lose it.
And again, I mean, it's when do you win? I mean, I see BA, and I know BA said this a number of times in chat. You're not winning the trade. You're not trading. Well, what did everyone say about Joe Sakic when he traded Matt Duchene? Oh, he traded this elite player for some futures. Well, now that trade looks pretty damn good. So, I mean,
Duchene looked pretty good
do you win it? Season, yeah. Do you win it the day of the trade? Well, that's probably pretty difficult to do. But when you look at it big picture, short term and long term, depending on the pieces that come back, the age, where they're at with team control, I mean, I certainly think you can make it. Hey, the best trades are ones that work out for both teams. I mean, it's not mutually exclusive that one team has to lose it and one team has to win. We've seen some trade. Hell, the Dubois-Laine trade looked like both teams lost for the first year, to be perfectly honest. So
fair enough.
Listen, we'll have some time to get into this and kick this around.
I just think it's more so losing or winning in the sense, not like, oh, you're the big loser, because you're right. Those answers get figured out over time. I just think it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you have a guy who's a point per game player now. You need to get something equivalent as important to your team and not draft picks. You know what I mean? Unless you can like get up to a top draft pick who's ready right away, then maybe. But you can't be swapping, middle round first, even multiple first round picks.
No, well, the Jets already have 2 first round picks this year. We know where they're at. I'm 100% with you. I mean, it will be more of a trade. Now, maybe you're bringing in a center that is just finishing his ELC as opposed to where Mark Scheifele is, and the guy's got a lot of potential but hasn't done it yet. I mean, I think that those are certainly possibilities, but hey, the bottom line is if Mark Scheifele's not on this hockey team next year, you've got a massive hole in the middle of playing time. You better have a plan to figure that one out because, you can feel that maybe things will be better atmosphere-wise and it might do some good things kind of in the dressing room and off the ice, but there's still a large number of goals and offensive production that leave the team if Scheifele is not a part of it. Jeff Hamilton's with us from the Winnipeg Free Press. Let's get to the Bombers. It's game week. The season is on. All that BS we talked about is behind us. And we got a game on Friday night against our old pal Paul LaPolice and the Ottawa Red Blacks. Of course, training camp finished on the weekend. A number of cuts were made. Right off the bat, was there any names that surprised you that were given their walking papers by the organization on the weekend?
Not really. I mean, I think there was some talk about, backup running back Kyle Borsa being released. That's, I don't know for sure, but that speaks to me a guy who turned down a practice roster spot, because I don't know why you wouldn't want wouldn't want Kyle Borsa on your practice roster at the very least.
Especially with 2 Canadian running backs.
Exactly. So, and he can play special teams. That tells me that's a guy who feels like he has opportunity elsewhere, and, a bit of a crowded kitchen, with the running backs as far as, Winnipeg goes. So that one, I guess, was a little bit, there's guys like, there's a handful of guys like, Watt Filer, who caught a big touchdown, pass against the Riders, and he was ultimately released. There's a couple of those guys where they showed off a little bit, in those games, but didn't do much otherwise. So it's not. I mean, there's also a pretty, the Bombers also have a pretty crowded receivers group, and they got guys who they liked from last year. I thought. Not so much, so it wouldn't be a release, but I thought it was interesting that they clearly want Mark Leggio to be the triple threat, moving Ali Murtada to the practice roster as, I think as a safety net. Now, lots of things can happen. I don't see this as a money thing where they put him on the practice roster for a week or a couple days and then bring him back up. It's not like the NHL. They're not, pinching pennies in that respect. So I think that's interesting. I talked to Mark Leggio today. I think he's ready to take over that role. I think he's comfortable. He put in a big offseason. As we know, the kicking game, when you're back-to-back champions, that one area of your team that doesn't seem as tightly, locked in, gets a lot of attention. So that's certainly why, the kicking game is done as much. But yeah, I mean, I can't really think of any guys in Winnipeg, even
as far as the receivers, I know Antonio Nunn got brought up, and Blake Jackson, I thought Blake
Jackson played well too in that first game in particular. He caught all 4 of his targets, right? I mean, how much more can you ask of him? And who knows? Maybe some of these guys got offered practice roster spots and just turned them down. Or, we're just outright released. I mean, there's other factors at play, beyond just the game. But yeah, I thought Jackson played well too. Was it Simpson? I thought the American running back. I thought they liked McRae. But I mean, that's also a worst case scenario too, right? If you need kind of both your Canadian running backs to go down. Need them both to go down to bring in an American running back. So, but there's also a bit of roster flexibility. Malcolm Thompson at safety, he had a pretty good camp in preseason games. He was a heavy hitter. He seems to be taking over the role at safety for now while Brandon Alexander gets back. He's Canadian, so there's some ratio flexibility right there. If he does start, looks like he will. But yeah, as far as cuts, I think you look at, and Mike O'Shea, I thought, put it perfectly today. A lot of difficult decisions. A lot of unhappy faces when you give the news, and then when you show up, on a day like today, with all the happy faces and the guys, goofing around and then getting serious for practice. I think it's
Well,
Yeah,
we talked about the
yeah.
cuts. We talked about the cuts. I mean, now that training camp is finished and we sort of have the roster, we've got a pretty good idea about who's on it, who's off it. I mean, was there a big winner from training camp? Is there a guy or two that played their way onto the team that, maybe at the beginning of training camp, we weren't really thinking that they were in the plans?
Well, I would put Malcolm Thompson there, to be honest with you. I thought when he popped, I forget, or it was Charles Nelson, former Bomber, that he just laid the pop on there. I think those are the kind of plays that reverberate with Mike O'Shea, right? I mean, you want to see a guy, you want a guy to get the ball, and then you want to physically remove it from him with your physicality. That's gonna turn heads. I'm trying to think of I want to say Declan Schoen, right? But he's kind of been showing off since the start of training camp, so it doesn't really answer your question. He's working with the ones. He's looking pretty good. He's looking sure-handed.
Is he the guy that gets that Jalen Saunders spot that they?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting too. Like, even if you get off the guys that actually made the team, like, we haven't seen Greg Ellington in some time. Like, he got injured early in camp. He's a big guy, man. Like, he's, I was, questioning a little bit what he would bring to the table, because he's, and nothing against him. He's just like, at what point are things going to kind of even out for Greg Ellington? He's been in the league for so long and at such a high clip. Like, when does he fall off, right? And so, he didn't have a great year in Edmonton. He had a pretty good year. He had about 600 and something yards, missed a few games. And I think if you would have prorated, it would have been about 1,200 yards in a season, which we know is a terrific stat line for receivers. However, of that 600 yards, almost half of it was in 2 different games, and against kind of lesser competition. So Ottawa and Montreal, I believe those 2 teams were. But just to speak about him, he was at it today. He looks good. He looks dominating. I mean, the O-line looks good. I mean, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for guys to come off and shine. And so the guys that did make it, I mean, it's still very early, right? I mean, camp was kind of a bit of a, how do you describe it? Just went by really quick, right? When you had the players strike, and then you had 2 games back to back, within 4 days of each other, like, time really flew by. So, I think there's still going to be a bit of a, figuring out process here for the Bombers and who's going to start. That's why this week's so important, to figure out who's with the ones, and they can certainly change. But there are only an X amount of spots that are up for grabs. Well, the rest of them are filled in with guys that we're all familiar with and have been pretty darn good players for years now.
No, it's a good point. Jeff Hamilton's with us, of course. Countdown to kickoff is already on. We're 4 days away from getting it going. I imagine you're going to be busy all over the Bomber beat for the next few days heading into the game.
Yeah, all over that. Got some other work I've been kind of picking at for the last month and a bit, and always keeping an eye on hockey and sports and stuff like that. It's a busy time of year. Even the off seasons, it's an on season. So certainly an exciting time for sure. I'm looking forward to the CFL getting underway and getting those games under this weekend. I think it's going to be a really cool weekend. But yeah, just working, man.
Hey, it's a good thing you had 4 days off, because if your premonition comes true that something happens in the next few days, it'll be a very, very busy week for you, both on the hockey and the football beat going forward.
Fun. I could use it. Yeah, sounds like a busy time coming up here. Who knows? I honestly, I feel like something's got to give here. So, this should be an exciting week. If it's not, I think we start getting into that territory of like, what's going on here? Like I said, I mean, a lot of teams got a lot of stuff they need to figure out. I'd put Jets up at the top of the list. So, time is of the essence, as I've said a few times in this interview, and something's got to give pretty soon here.
Next week, Jeff's junk. We need a couple of items that you picked up over the weekend that we can flash off. Just before we go, everyone's asking about this sign behind you, the subarctic goats. What exactly is that?
So that's the 18 over pod boys. Well, Mike Smith. This is my beer league team that I made. We had a tournament. We had a tournament of golf tournament. We raised some money for charity and get all the guys out. That was this past week, not this past weekend, the weekend before. And we all met at a local watering hole afterwards. And I guess I stuck around too long and had to cover some of the bill. So I found this in the back of of Smitty's patio and said, "Yoink, okay, this is my new wall art." So then we made a joke about putting it on with your show, as they're big fans of the show, and I'm big fans of those guys. So subarctic goats, it's
Shout out to the 18 over par guys. I know they'll be fired
There
up
it
for
is.
the Canadian Open this week. And of course,
Oh, yeah, big
your
time.
colleague Mike McIntyre is going to be out there after
Yeah,
following
very
Aaron
cool.
Cockrell around there. So lots of great stuff coming up this week in the Winnipeg Free Press. Hammer,
Totally.
all the best. We'll chat later on this week and get ready for that game on the weekend and a big Saturday morning on the streets.
Huge Saturday morning.
Or the back
Thanks a lot.
lanes, I should say.
Thanks for having me on. Front yards, backyards, garages. We don't discriminate.
Wherever.
Come on out. Get out there early. Say hi if you see me out there. I'll be around.
And I'll be
thanks so much,
following
Josh.
him around going, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
take it easy, dude.
Thanks for having me. And to the shout out to the commenters as well. Thanks, guys.
Great stuff. There's Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter at Jeff K. Hamilton. All right, we're going to get Remis back in here. I know he's still bent about the Evander Kane suspension. Before we do that, in addition to a few 1919s on the weekend, especially at the ballpark. Oh, was that good? Definitely mixed in a couple CC and gingers. The drink of the summer already mixed for you, ready to drink at your local beer store or liquor marts. The Canadian Club and Ginger is available in 6-packs. Ready for you. Throw it in the cooler and have a great afternoon outside sipping on a great cocktail that you don't have to mix yourself. Of course, the great taste of Canadian Club, also available at your local Manitoba liquor store, and it will be flowing on Friday night at IG Field. Of course, Canadian Club is the official spirit and sponsor of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We will get to our Assiniboia Downs picks in just a minute, but another great night to maybe head over to your favorite Boston Pizza with the gang and watch what could be the Oilers' last stand tonight. Whether you're heading to the Taylor, downtown, Portage Avenue, wherever the nearest BP is, they'll have the game on with big sound and great deals as well, including their happy hour from 3 to 6 and from 9 to midnight each and every night. And hey, if you're staying at home, make it a game day. Check out their game day deals and order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we will get to our Coolbet lines in a minute and check out what's going on, but let's get Remis back in here. We got to make our picks for Assiniboia Downs, which is back on the track tonight. But Remo, we talked to Hammer, and we have, of course, talked to Poulin about this. I know you've been waiting all weekend to drop your take on NHL player safety and how Evander Kane only got one game.
It's too easy. I think I was kind of disappointed that he got one game, and when a guy's going into the boards and you nudge him and he's off balance, goes in and gets injured, out for the series, I thought that was worth one game. I guess didn't have the theatrics of getting carried out on a stretcher. I mean, to compare like that to I don't know what the difference is. Really, both the dangerous play. Kane's got the history as well. Shafley had never made a body check in his career. I don't understand how that's one game and the Shafley hit is 4.
And Poulin made a great point. I mean, he didn't even get kicked out of the game, which was egregious. But often they'll, I guess, err on the side of keeping the guys in the game and then say, well, NHL player safety can handle it. And then, frankly, they didn't.
Yeah, I'm just like puzzled. And someone in chat commented 2 games for the hit, 2 games so they don't have to feel the wrath of the Montreal fans. I kind of agree that because it was on Montreal, maybe there was more. I mean, we did see the fans in chat, and I'm definitely afraid.
Yeah, we had 20,000 of them here.
I'm afraid of Montreal fans after that. I think I started getting death threats for just being a supporter of the thing. But we thought there would be some harsher standard after that hit, and we've seen other headshots. Trouba on Crosby being one of them, and nothing happens, and you see this Mark Shafley hit, which at the time I thought was a clean hit with an unfortunate ending, and he got 4 games. So I don't know. I thought we were gonna have harsher penalties, but we're not. And I know Oilers fans are all bent about the Landeskog hit on Yamamoto. I mean, I was like, I didn't think that one was as bad as some other blindside ones.
Well, it was a blindside hit, but he just didn't hit him in the head.
I didn't think he got him square in the head. I thought it was shoulder, and Landeskog's a lot bigger than Yamamoto, so that's part of it. And then the other one everyone's bent about in Edmonton, the McKinnon. They're calling it a slew foot on Draisaitl. I think a slew foot is when you take your foot and kick out another guy's leg. This is him putting his knee in the back of Draisaitl's knee to put him off balance. It's same idea.
Yeah.
I think again that's
dirty and dangerous.
That's pretty dirty and dangerous, sneaky dirty. from a guy, Nathan McKinnon. So I think a lot of people are just puzzled about the Kane thing. Going back to last year, I think everyone can agree the 4 games was ridiculous.
Certainly. I mean, we all thought, oh, maybe they're creating a new standard. Well,
they did
no,
not.
They didn't. They did it for 24 hours and then went back to the way that it's been. And listen, there was a lot of that on Jets Twitter over the course of the weekend. People going, "Are you kidding me?" And again, it would be one thing if Evander had the clean record that Scheifele had going in. But I do wonder, I mean, like Tim Peel, I think he's a knucklehead, of course, and embarrasses himself quite often on social media right now. But maybe there was more to it. I mean, when he took those shots at Mark Scheifele, it shocked me. It shocked many people that how an NHL ref would have such strong opinions and say such, say the things that Tim Peel said, like, the refs have no respect for him or anything like that. And who knows, maybe that trickled into NHL player safety and it made him an easy guy to make an example out of. It certainly doesn't make it right.
Wouldn't Kane be the easiest guy to make an example of?
That's the point. I mean, this Evander.
What are we doing here? And I keep seeing videos of like other players hitting guys in the back and injuring them. There was one hit, like someone shoved McDavid. I keep seeing that one, and Crosby on Lindgren. Like, you shouldn't be able to shove a guy in the back, going and putting him off balance and sending him flying into the boards. Can we agree that shouldn't be in the game? And
do we have any objections?
Is there anyone like one game? Like, what are we doing? Maybe they just, I'm assuming they just figured that would just be for the series. Anyway, I don't know what Chad thinks, but like, we're all ready for this one to be over.
Yes, we are. We'll see whether it happens tonight. Let's get to the Coolbet lines in a second. But first up, let's get to our picks for Assiniboia Downs. Live racing is back. We had 2 dates last week, Tuesday, Wednesday. This week, it's Monday and Tuesday. No live racing on Wednesday, June 8th. And then next week, the regular Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday schedule in full begins and will continue throughout the season. I'm actually hoping to get out to the track tomorrow. I have a major hankering. I haven't had a good prime rib in a long time. We know the famous prime rib buffet is back, so I think myself and a couple of the fellas might head down and hopefully win some races live and in person. That being said, let's get to our picks for tonight. Remo, I have put together 4 selections. I'm going to start in race number 6. I've got a 1-4 Quinella for $5. Now, for race 3, this is kind of complicated. I've somehow have managed to do it's like a triactor wheel, a $1 triactor. I've got 2 and 5 as my, that can finish in first. I've got 2, 3, 5 that can finish in second. And I've got 3, 5, and 8 that can finish in third. Somehow that came up to $7. Normally I do just the straight 3. Well, I'll tell you that. For race 5, I've got the regular triactor wheel, 5, 7, and 8, $1 any which way, $6 bet. And then I finished it off. I had $2 remaining. And in race number 6, I'm taking 7 to win for a toonie. That is my $20 of wagers tonight. What do you got cooking?
All right, here are my wagers, and you've got a bit of a lead on me here from the night 1.
Yes, we pushed, shall we say, the wrong way on night number 2. But yes, you were down 10, I was up 6. So I guess I have a $16 or $17 lead on you.
Did I not put in the right number of bets? Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I think I have to do one more.
All right, well, give us the ones that you've got right now.
Crap, this is what I have right now. Race 3. Sorry, I thought I can't add, clearly. Race 3, I'm going Wolowitz, the place. Horse Sticks, Wolowitz. I don't know if you watch Big Bang Theory. People think I look like that guy, so I dressed up as him for Halloween one year. Got a soft spot for that one. Race 4, I'm doing a tractor box. 2, 6, and 7. Dictator, Mr. Pickles, and Camino de Estrella. And my other pick, race 3, I have a 5-2 Quinella, Proud and Loud, and Tis Funny. I think you're on that, aren't you? Aren't you in Tis Funny also?
I am.
Wait.
That is race number 3. Oh, race number 3. That's part of my weird $7 triactor kind of wheel.
Oh, I messed something up. I also have Wolowitz to play, so I can't win both of those bets. So I messed something up here, Huss. I just got so blindsided by the name. I have to do one more as well.
Why don't you pick it out off of race 7? Because that's the one that we haven't got to. Oh, geez. 9
Race 7?
horses in race number 7.
Okay, sure. I'll just pick a big winner from race 7.
Union Smarty was pretty big last year. Cabo Dorado's the favorite.
I like this horse's name. I'm picking this one. Race 7. Hey, Runaway. Number 4 to win.
Opening at 6-1. So there you go. Race 7.
Go.
I might add a little. I might ride
There
with
it
you
is.
on that one just with an extra bet. Of course, folks like us, if you do want to make a few sprinkles on the track and you're not able to make it out, just get over to hpibet.com and you'll be able to wager on Assiniboia Downs as well as other tracks throughout the world. And again, Parade to Post tonight, 7:30 p.m., tomorrow, 7:30 p.m., and then next week, the full weeks resumes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every week through the summer over at Assiniboia Downs. And if you were thinking about taking advantage of the prime rib buffet or more, give them a call or get online and find out more on making a reservation to bring out your crew and get in there.
There was one horse that I wanted to give a shout out to. I should have bet on this one just for fun. Race 2, horse 6. I don't know if anyone out there is a South Park fan, but this horse named Taco Flavored Kisses. That's a brilliant name, and I probably should have just bet on that horse just because I love whoever named that one. So I want to give a shout out to Taco Flavored Kisses.
Nicely done. I'm surprised that you didn't. All right, let's get to the Coolbet lines for tonight.
I do have an opinion today. I know that you banished me from doing Coolbet picks on Friday. Because Thursday, you're like, what do you think? I was like, I don't know. I could pick either one. And then you brought in,
or it could be the other guy.
Yeah, and then you brought in Chris Abbott the next day. I was like, all right, I guess I'm getting on the suspended list here. I see how it is. Fine.
I brought Chris in because we weren't doing the lock shop that
benching.
day. He had some great. Okay, well, anyways, you're back in the game tonight, and we've got the Avalanche. We've got the Avalanche at -128 to complete the sweep. Are the Oilers at +114. What's interesting about this game is Dylan Holloway, one of their top prospects. It looks like he's going to make his NHL debut tonight in the game with Evander Kane out. See where he fits in. Might be a sneaky play for a potential point. But hey, they got their backs against the wall, and you know the Avalanche would love to get the extra week of rest while Tampa and the Rangers beat the hell out of each other.
Going with Colorado, -128. That is too low. McDavid, he's not doing what he did before. They don't have Evander Kane. Defense is banged up. Mike Smith, makes like the craziest save and then lets in the easiest goal. Very odd.
Won a game. Always won a game.
Yeah, I think it's hard to go. I think -128 seems low. Does it not?
I'll be honest, it kind of did to me. I thought we'd be looking at about -140 or something like that with a lot of people thinking the Oilers were going to finish it up.
Any good?
I'm not even sure. Let's just see if Holloway is even listed right now because he I don't think there's a goal prop yet on him in his first game in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, I'm looking at the goal props, McDavid, Draisaitl, McKinnon. I'll go further down. I mean, Makar +260. I feel like that's always worth taking. I mean, these guys have been kind of hot, Nichushkin and Lehkonen.
No, you're exactly right.
If you don't want to take like, the easy like McKinnon +115. So I just like looking at the goal scoring prop.
Yeah, McDavid at the top of the list at +109 and Leon Draisaitl at +113.
Yeah.
NBA last night was the game number 2. Big bounce back for the Warriors. And it looks like these games are going to essentially be -3.5 for who's ever in home right now. It was Warriors -3.5 for the last couple of games. I think it got to 4.5 last night before tip-off. Celtics -104. However, the series bets right now still in favor. Oh, it's funny. Actually, Boston's even money right now, even with home field or home court. So if you do like Boston, even money pretty good right now after that loss last night. The Warriors at -116. And just quickly back to the National Hockey League for a minute. Tomorrow, Rangers plus 148, Lightning minus 175 at home. And the series bet right now is still plus 115 for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So if you do think the Lightning after that win are back in the series and going to win it, you can get more than double your money, plus 115 over there at Coolbet. Tomorrow we'll have to get, and we will definitely do this on the Lock Shop tomorrow, which we're going to be getting going, I think, at about 11:45 our time. Make sure to just check out my Twitter feed or Dustin Nielsen's feed for that if you want to get it live. Subscribe to the Lock Shop podcast wherever you're getting Winnipeg Sports Talk. We will talk NFL, we're NHL, we'll talk NBA, we'll talk a little Major League Baseball, and we'll be all over the Canadian Open and make our picks for that event as well.
I thought you were going to say Canadian Football League, because that starts this week too, and we do have some lines for that.
Oh, there's a Thursday game for that as well.
And also, if anyone wants to play CFL Fantasy, hit us up. We do have a DraftKings League that offers it. Story, Ontario. If you live in Ontario, you're not allowed. But so I start a contest, 75 people, $3 entry. Let's see if we can fill it. I mean, if it doesn't fill, it'll still run. But I did it high. But we were getting 40. We were getting 40 people early on in the season. And week one, there's always a lot of hype. We filled 18 slots. So
excellent. I'll be jumping in on that. Again, search Winnipeg Sports Talk on the leagues, or just send us a tweet or a message or whatever, and we'll make sure we get you an invite. Make sure to include your DK, your DraftKings handle, if you want us to invite you.
I'll post it in chat as well. But yeah,
it's tough. CFL futures, by the way, just as we've got 3 days till kickoff. Bombers 3-1, Riders plus 450, Ticats and Argos at 5-1. And yes, that Montreal game, the CFL kickoff, it's in Calgary actually. Stamps, after throttling their opponents in the preseason, for whatever that's worth, 3-point favorites at home. And you just mentioned that your boy Badge, Vernon Adams Jr., will be the starter for the Alouettes on Thursday night.
Yeah, I would lean. I haven't looked too closely, but I'd probably lean Montreal there. I think Calgary's kind of on the downslope. Maybe Bo had some injuries last year, but he hasn't been the same. I do like Montreal, though they're kind of like boom or bust. Montreal, especially for fantasy purposes. I'm a big fan of Vernon Adams. I saw they did cut Quan Bray on the weekend too. So,
well, Bray didn't Bray get busted with
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he had. I don't want to say it wrong, but he had some off the field problems.
Okay,
shall we say, like Nate Newton style, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay, I know what that is. You want to go?
By the way, Bombers are 9.5-point favorites right now on Ottawa, which is a big number, especially when you consider how improved we think the Ottawa Red Blacks will be. But hey, when you win back-to-back Grey Cups and you're raising a banner and you're starting at home, you'll be a significant favorite, and we'll see how that goes. But right now, minus 112 if you think the Bombers can win by double digits. And, of course, the Bombers are a massive moneyline favorite at minus 417. Great show today. And, we were just mentioning the golf in the Canadian Open. Can't wait to have Mike McIntyre on the program tomorrow, Reem. He's going to join us from Southern Ontario for the Canadian Open after following Aaron Cockrell in his last event on the European Tour. And, of course, the Manitoban making his PGA Tour debut as he'll be participating in this week's Canadian Open.
Very cool. I also want to hear what Mike's experience was landing in Toronto at Pearson Airport. As we've heard, it's chaos. Chaos there. Trending on Twitter. Pearson International Airport.
Everyone's probably seen this so far, but Ryan Whitney, of course, of Spittin' Chicklets. He and the Chicklets boys were in the house for Saturday night in Edmonton, trying to get home. I think he spent 26 hours or something like that in the Toronto airport. And listen, his tweets and a couple videos from it sound like, I'll say this much. I'll be doing everything I can to avoid flying in or out of Toronto at any point soon. Check that out. I know Barstool's got a pretty funny compilation of all of his tweets, but if you just go see, what is it, Ryan Whitney 26 or something like that is his account.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, but you say to other people, Pearson's, lines extraordinaire, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's like, oh yeah. So nice to see that's getting some press about the
Ryan Whitney, ironically, might be the difference maker that actually gets some improvements to what's going on right now. It sounded like a traveler's worst nightmare, basically, what went down.
Yeah, speaking of nightmares, we were talking to Mike. Remember last week, he didn't get his suitcase in Germany. I don't even know if it ever arrived. So we'll be hearing. I saw him tweeting about it. Like he's going to give us that. One thing before we go, this came out during the show. Phil Mickelson signing with Live Golf. Not a surprise, really. You saw that one spot, but.
Well, he did. I mean, if you go to Phil's Twitter, I mean, a big, 3 or 4 paragraph apology. And, listen, this is all part of a bit of a PR. He said he's been in therapy, working on things. Again, apologized for the things that he said before, I guess, to Alan Shipnuck. And, now, that's the first we've heard from Phil in months, and yes, he will be part of the Live Golf Tour, and that'll be a big story in and around the Canadian Open. But of course, Dustin Johnson, I mean, a former winner and basically Mr. Team RBC, bailing on the tourney and the PGA Tour, the big shock of last week. But still going to be a great field. Rory's there, JT's there, and we'll break that down for you over the next couple days. In fact, Feinberg I'm not sure whether it's at his club this year or next year, but he was out for the practice round today, so we'll see if he can jump on Wednesday and give us his thoughts on the tournament coming up. And of course, Mike will join us tomorrow, talk a little bit more about Aaron Cockrell's season so far this year and teeing it up for the first time on the PGA Tour. Hey, big thanks to Dave Poulin, Jeff Hamilton, and Steven Sandor for a great show today to kick off the week. We'll be back tomorrow. The latest on the Stanley Cup playoffs, Winnipeg Blue Bombers preparation for the Ottawa Red Blacks, and Mike McIntyre at the Canadian Open. And of course, any new information on Trot's Watch, you'll hear it here on Winnipeg Sports Talk tomorrow. Thanks to all of our sponsors, and thanks to you for making us a part. Oh my God! Oh! And thumbs up on your way out. And we'll catch you tomorrow at 1 o'clock live on YouTube and in your podcast feed later on tomorrow afternoon. Thanks so much. Enjoy the sunshine, folks. Have a great night, and we'll catch you tomorrow on WST.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home! Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.